Green.
Here.
Mr. Howard.
Here.
I know Mr. Lally's not. Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. Malaguti.
Here.
Ms. O'Connor.
Here.
Mr. Pizarro.
Here.
Ms. Richards.
Here.
Mr. Snyder.
Here.
Ms. Tompkins.
Here.
Mr. Wright is out today, and Mr. Young is gone. Okay, excellent. So this meeting is being conducted in a hybrid format, and I'm sure you all have heard this about 1,000 times, but this will be 1,001. We will be airing this meeting on Comcast 9, Verizon 47, or on PAC TV's YouTube channel, which can be viewed at pactv.org/stream. The ground rules in this committee is any speaker giving public comment is allotted up to 5 minutes in which to speak. Public comment can be made at the beginning or at the end of each meeting or in regard to a particular agenda item the speaker wishes to be heard on. Anyone who would like to attend this meeting virtually can do so. We are on Zoom, so you can download the Zoom app and go to meeting code 995-2986-0638. Our passcode is 100131. And you can also join by phone. We will not be able to see your face. We'll just see a phone number, and that number is 929-205-6099. Same meeting code of 995-2986-0638, and our meeting passcode is 100131. Any questions so far? Great. Is there a public comment to start us off? Yes, ma'am. Could you step up to the podium and tell us your name and your address, please? Yes, we can.
Well, I live in North Plymouth, right near Benny's Plaza. I just came out of a meeting with the Episcopal Ladies Evening Group, and we voted that we applaud the meeting today. We just would like to ask that you put in low-income housing. We do not want to attract any more people that would skew the financial aspects of our community, but offer lower than low and some middle income, but we're opposed to any more expensive condos that that leave out the children of our community. And personally speaking, 3 of my friends, including me, our children have all gone to Europe, are living there now permanently because they can't afford to buy here. They can't afford the benefits that they don't get, that they do get in Europe. And this project, which is just absolutely in a nice place, would be better served if we could appeal to people because it's right on a transportation corridor, and it would be perfect for families, provided we gave them recreational opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will duly note that when we have that discussion. Any other public comment? Okay, let's get to work. Agenda items for today: to approve the minutes of August 21st and to run through Articles 15, 16, 17, 18, and Article 9, which was moved from last week to this day to accommodate the presenter's schedule. And to conclude the night, we will hear from Articles 31 and 32, which will not be presented at the fall annual town meeting. So I assume everybody has read the minutes. Any questions, edits, additions? No? Okay. Mr. Dunn, would you care to make a motion to approve the minutes of August 21?
So moved.
Thank you. And Ms. Butler, would you care to second that motion?
Second.
We have a first from Mr. Dunn and a second from Ms. Butler. Any discussion on the minutes of August 21? Seeing and hearing none, let's go through the roll. Ms. Butler, do you approve or not of the minutes of August 21?
I approve.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn?
Abstain.
Mr. Green?
Approve.
Mr. Howard?
Approve.
Mr. Lawler?
Approved.
Mr. Malaguti?
Approve.
Ms. O'Connor?
Approve.
Mr. Bizarro?
Approve.
Ms. Richards?
Approve.
Mr. Snyder?
Approve.
Ms. Tompkins?
Approve.
Okay. We have 10 approve, 0 against, and 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay, let's go on to Article 15, which is a Title V Repair Fund, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer, or borrow $400,000 for the purposes of financing the following water pollution abatement facility projects: sewer tie-ins or the repair, replacement, and/or upgrade of septic systems pursuant to agreements between the Board of Health and residential property owners, including without limitation the payment of all costs thereof as defined in Section 1 of Chapter 29C of the general laws, and to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow $400,000 under general law, Chapter 44, or any other enabling authority, which amount may be borrowed through the Massachusetts Water Pollution Abatement Trust or otherwise, and that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to take any other action necessary to carry out this project. I see Lee Hartman, Director of Planning for the Town of Plymouth. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So this is the 15th round of this, or 16th round. We've done this 15 times before. What we're looking to do is to borrow from the state revolving fund $400,000 that will go for septic system repairs. We will charge a 5% interest rate for these. 2% goes to the town, 2% goes to the state, 3% goes to the town. The state requires the 2% for their administrative work. The 3% that comes to the town for the interest rate covers the cost of borrowing and the work that we have to do to monitor to make sure these loans are paid back. So we generally rent out we generally loan out about $25,000 is the average, what we're doing these days for a septic system upgrade, but we can go as high as $35,000 and in some cases even higher. So again, this is a great program. We borrow the money, the 5% cost covers the town's cost for this. We make it available to homeowners with failed septic systems or a failed septic system who seeks to tie into town sewer if it's available. And I would note to date, we've helped about 310 homeowners to upgrade their septic systems through this program. So again, 16th time we've done it. It's a great program. We're down to about $150,000 that we have left from the last time we did this. At $25,000 a system, we're talking about 6 more systems before we're out of money. So we thought this was a good time to come in, borrow some more money, and help some more residents upgrade their failed septic systems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hartman, for that explanation. And do we have any questions for Mr. Hartman? Yes, Mr. Howard, the floor is yours.
So how much were we allotted last time? Was it 400?
400,000, yeah.
Mr. Snyder, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In all the past borrowings we've had, has everybody kept up with their payments? Have we had any problems at all?
Yes, so the way this works, is unlike other programs, this is assessed to your tax bill. So it goes on to your taxes. So if you're not paying your taxes, we could foreclose on your house. Rarely ever happens. If there's a problem, the bank would be taking over those payments. So again, this is one of the safest ways to lend money because we just assess this additional cost on your tax bill.
Mr. Malaguti, the floor is yours.
So with the funding for this, I've been in approval for this in the past. I do have one question though. Based upon the last 2 to 3 years with infrastructure and environmental concerns, especially relating to issues happening on the Cape and then possibly heading our way, that we may need to drastically rethink septic systems, and that, like, would we be looking in the future at increasing this fund to accommodate these issues? And if so, would we possibly be changing percentages as well, possibly in the need to, one, have more affordability for the residents, but also not drain town coffers at the same time.
So I'm not sure what, that full piece, but the 5% that we have to charge is set by state. So the state
Okay.
says you must charge 5%. You can't do less, you can't do more. 3 to the town, 2 to the state. So the 5% is set by state law. But definitely, if we have new regulations, we've already seen, I think if I went back 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, we were probably we were probably loaning out 10 to 15,000 a system, but the costs recently, as everything has gone up so high, so that's why we're looking at now 25 to 35,000. And yes, if DEP approves and requires additional septic system improvements that are even more costly, I could see these loan amounts going up to whatever level is needed to repair these systems.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Richards, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Hartman. With the passing of the bylaw for accessory dwelling units, would you anticipate an increase in septic system upgrades and the need for this fund?
I don't know. I don't think the accessory will have a big impact. And again, this is for people who have failed systems. So you can't just come in and say, I'm doing an accessory dwelling unit and I need to add additional capacity to my existing system. It has to be a failed system. So it couldn't be just for an upgrade because you couldn't do it for an accessory unit, or if I came in and said, I'm adding a bedroom, I want to borrow this money to upgrade my system. It's for failed systems.
Right, no, I was just looking at it like, okay, I think I'm going to do an accessory dwelling unit, but I know my septic system is not going to pass, so I'm going to put...
There could be that
I'm going to
scenario.
put the cart before the horse and,
It could be that scenario. And again, the goal here is not to worry so much about any other things except the environment. And if you have a failed system, our priority is to get that upgraded.
Yeah, and I think just my point was, we want to make sure that we have enough.
Yep,
in
but
that
I could see a
fund to make
scenario where
sure that-
somebody's going to
yeah.
come in and wants to do some upgrades. Maybe that's another bedroom or a new accessory dwelling unit, and they have a failed system and they want to upgrade it. I think we'd have to look at how much money we loan to fix what's in place, and then not necessarily fix the whole thing, but they might cover some of that cost, and we would cover the basic cost of what it would cost without the additional bedroom or accessory unit.
Yeah, and I think this program has been a huge benefit, so thank you very much.
Okay, yes, Ms. O'Connor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm assuming so, but is this amount anticipated to basically meet the need for
So
the year?
we don't
Is
want
there
to
a
be
waiting
borrowing a
list, or-
lot of money. So we come back every couple of years as we need it. So again, we're down to about 150,000. We thought it was a good time to get the appropriation. We still don't necessarily even borrow the money right after town meeting vote. We meet with Lynn Barrett and with the finance department, and we debate and discuss when we think is a good time to borrow. We're borrowing up to 400,000. We could borrow it in a couple of different slugs at a time as we need it, so we're not paying additional interest. So it's really the authorization of town meeting to allow us to do it, and then as we feel we need the money, we borrow it.
Thank you.
Ms. Butler, the floor is yours.
Mr. Hartman, if someone has a failed system, but there is a sewer line, are they required to connect to the sewer line, or can they then just put another septic system in?
I don't know what it would be the regulations of the sewer department. I'm not sure if it's a mandatory hookup or not, but certainly we would encourage the tie into the sewer system. I'm just not familiar with whether or not if they can mandate you to do it. I don't believe so. I don't think we get to the point where we're telling a homeowner, you must do that. But certainly we make that money available. I know if I was on town sewer, I would certainly rather have that and not worry about every time I flush, but I
Right.
don't think it's mandated.
Right, the town that I came from, the city I came from before, when they put the sewer line in, you had to connect. You were
And
given up to
that
2
is a
years.
scenario that could happen separate of this program, where if we decide we're expanding a sewer line down a street, that is a scenario that probably would happen in that type of case. But again, I don't think by a failed septic system we'd be forcing that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Snyder, would you entertain a motion to approve Article 15?
I would move to approve Article 15.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Lawler, would you care to second that motion?
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a first by Mr. Snyder and a second by Mr. Lawler. Any discussion about Article 15? Mr. Malaguti, the floor is yours.
I'm going to be approving this, but I do think we do need to look in the future, especially as regulations do come down from DEP at the ability of this program to expand. I think it should expand, but we just want to make sure that it makes sense for us logistically and financially. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Malaguti. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go to the vote. On Article 15, Ms. Butler, are you for or against?
I am for.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Malaguti?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
And 11 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions. Article 15 has passed.
Thank
you, Mr. Hartman. Okay. Article 16, zoning bylaw, village open space development amendments. To see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Plymouth zoning bylaw, Article 2, Subchapter 203-3, definitions, Article 7, special regulations, 207-5, village open space development by adding waterfront to list of zoning districts where village open space development may be proposed by adding a reference to waterfront to subchapters 203-3 and 207-5, and further correcting one clerical error in 203-3 by striking the reference to RR that is shown with a strike-through as substantially as set forth in a document on file with the town clerk, or take any other action relative thereto. So we are probably going to have some questions unless you can explain what RRs and WFs are.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I'll just start off. So this is the waterfront zone, and I'm going to just run through a animation here that just shows the zone so you can see the entire waterfront zone and where it is. I'll do that in a second. So the waterfront zone is a hybrid zone that allows for residential uses, and it also allows for water-dependent, marine-related uses in it. Right now, you can either do a single or two-family depending on your lot size, or a single-family house, or high-density multifamily in the waterfront zone. So we have a property owner, and I do see at least one person who's involved in the property, who came to us and said, well, we don't want to do high-density development, but we want to do more than a single-family home. How can we do it? And we started looking at our bylaw, and there are very few tools in the waterfront district that would allow us to create something flexible. So that's when we looked and said this village open space development, which is a clustering or an open space bylaw that we've used quite a bit in the village centers, and in waterfront zone is essentially a village center zone. We thought that this was the best tool that's available to allow for some flexibility, but not doing something that has high density. So when you look now, when I say that you can do multifamily, it's a special permit by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the density is 7 units per acre is what the density of development is. And as we run through my presentation, you'll see where some of that is. What this is a lower density, not 7, but 2 units per acre. And the other thing that's important is if they do this through this open space bylaw, 40% of the lot has to be set aside as open space. So we're really trying to create an option for a property owner to do something more than a single-family house, but not as intensive as, say, Copper Cove, which is in the waterfront district, which is a higher density multifamily development. I would also point out that should this be adopted, it still requires a vote of the planning board, a supermajority, 4 out of 5 members, and the board must find that the design and alternative is superior in design to what you could do under conventional zoning. So again, this is the first stop, and then there's a special permit process you have to go through. I'll walk through and show you the property that brought this up, but also talk about some of these others. And the final thing is when we did our last revision of our bylaw, for some reason, the rural residential, RR, was included as one of the zones where you're allowed to do this. It doesn't fit, it doesn't belong. We have something called a Rural Density Development, RDD bylaw, and that's the open space bylaw we use in the rural parts of town. This is just a typo for the rural residential that should not have been there, and we'd just like to do that to clean that up. So with that, I will just kind of run through the waterfront district, and see if my mouse is running. Maybe this will work better. So to orient you, this is Hedge Road. This is the Sheehan family 8 Mates Trust property that you might have heard a little bit about, not in the waterfront zone. This is the end of Cottage Park here. So we have Jesse's Marine right here, some residential development, and then we start going down, and as you'll see, as I run this, hopefully, we go to the higher density condos that are just south off of Hedges Pond Road. And then as we go a little farther south, this is the property that we were looking at with a single-family home and then a large piece of undeveloped land, and we'll talk a little bit about it. But again, you can see the kind of density you can do with the multifamily. We're looking at something that will allow something more than one house, but certainly not at the density we see here. So as we go farther south, we immediately, after we pass some single-family homes off of Atlantic Ave, run into the Trust for Public Lands property. So this is all permanently protected open space. And I should point, too, that this is all parallel to the rail trail, the walking trail we have. So this is all permanently protected open space. Nothing could happen there with development. And as we go a little farther south, then we get to the Robbins Wharf. Again, this is the type of thing that right now the bylaw says you can do, special permit through the zoning board, but this property owner is looking for something that's a little more flexible, lower density. As we go beyond the Robbins Wharf property, we immediately come into the Nelson Field town-owned land. So this is town-owned land. As we look at other potential properties where this might happen, this is the entrance to Nelson Field. There's a single-family house kind of surrounded by Nelson Field, one house. So there would be the possibility also beyond the site that's the focus of this, where something could happen. But again, I would point out if they did do this, it's probably one more house, and 40% of that lot would have to be set aside as permanently protected open space. And then as we go a little farther south, the next two pieces of property that could have some potential are the Jesse Boatyard here off of Lothrop Street, and then the Cold Spring Club. Again, a lot of wetlands here, but you have the Cold Spring Club. And I'd point out, too, if for some reason these uses ceased and they sought to do it, we only have to look at the higher density Copper Cove right next door, that if they wanted to use this as an option instead of the higher density, it is something that could require 40% open space and a much lower density of 2 houses per acre versus 7 houses or 7 units per acre. Then once we go a little farther south, we get to the series of homes that are located off of Water Street across from the East Bay Grill, and then we come into the hotel and Village Landing, again, where this higher density already developed Town Wharf. Then the waterfront district takes a break as we go through the downtown harbor district, and it starts up again at the marina. Again, very few options to see anything happening there. The other potential location where something might happen could be the yacht club if they ever cease to exist. And then beyond that, we again go into higher density multifamily that already exists in the district, Stevens Field. And then we take a big long break as we go south. And then the last piece of waterfront property in the town, waterfront zoned property in the town, is the Burt's, former Burt's site and the hotel, the Pilgrim Sands Hotel. So again, unlikely that anything would ever happen there, and if it did, it would be at a much lower density. So this, I just did an aerial so you could see, this is the yacht club. So we have the yacht club itself, their storage shed, and again, there could be some potential here should they ever cease to have a yacht club. But as I pointed out before, instead of the higher density that you see immediately next door, it would be a much lower density with a requirement that 40% of that lot be set aside as open space. Then we go back up north, and this is just, again, to show you and that's great technology. This is just hold on. So this is the Cold Spring Club, the wetlands in the back, some potential here if the Cold Spring Club ever ceased to exist, and then this is the Jesse Boatyard that's there too. This is the site right next to Nelson Field entrance. And again, if they did something with this, it's 40% open space. And then we look at, this is the subject property that brought this all to our attention, and you can see here that you have that one single-family house, a nice piece of property here. I've already put them on notice that should this get approved, should they get a special permit, that we would really be looking and hoping that they would make that land a gift to the town to add to the rail trail, to provide a nice little scenic stop where you can have some beautiful views of Duxbury and Plymouth Bay. And then again, the last piece with any potential possibility is the Jesse Boatyard area. So again, in conclusion, 40% would be required as open space. It's a lower density than what you could do with the multifamily that we see all over this whole area. So we think this, and the planning board agreed unanimously that this is a good option and a good alternative in a fairly limited area, and I really don't see this being applied to any place other than the one property that brought this to our attention. And again, the planning board and staff would hope that you would support our recommendation to make this change to the zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman, for that explanation. Do we have any questions for Mr. Hartman? Whoa. I think you did a good job. Okay. Ms. Richards, would you care to move to approve Article 16?
I move to approve Article 16.
Thank you. And Mr. Howard, would you care to second Article 16?
Second.
So we have a first from Ms. Richards and a second from Mr. Howard. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, we will vote on whether to approve or reject Article 16. Ms. Butler, how do you vote?
I approve.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Malaguti?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
That's 11 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions. Article 16 has been approved by the Advisory and Finance Committee. Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Okay, and if you are just joining us on Zoom, we are on the September 4th Advisory and Finance Committee meeting down here at Town Hall in the Great Hall. And we are moving along to Article 17, Legislative Petition Land Bank, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Select Board to petition the Massachusetts General Court for special legislation to establish a Plymouth Land Bank, which will be funded through a 2% land transfer fee paid by buyers of real property in Plymouth. Said monies to be used to acquire land for open space, passive and active recreation, create affordable housing, and establish municipal facilities. Said special legislation to be substantially in the form of the document on file with the town clerk or as found on the town's website at www.plymouth-ma.gov/1344/Plymouth-land-bank-2024. Provided, however, that the general court may make clerical or editorial changes in form only to the bill unless the Select Board approves amendments to the bill before enactment by the general court. Provided further that the Select Board is hereby authorized to approve amendments which shall be within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition or take any other action relative thereto. And we have my predecessor and Select Board member, Kevin Canty. The floor
Hi.
is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Neerman. Thank you, members of the Advisory and Finance Committee. I had the pleasure of serving with many of you. It's good to see the familiar faces, and I welcome the new faces as well. So I am Kevin Canty. I am the Vice Chair of the Plymouth Select Board. This is an article that is on the goals and priorities of the Select Board for this year. It's also being sponsored for town meeting purposes by the Planning Board, so both your Planning Board and your Select Board are in favor of this particular article, this particular initiative, and what it will do for Plymouth. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the details of the proposed legislation. This is special legislation that would have to be submitted to the General Court for passage up on Beacon Hill. That will play into some of the details of why we're doing it the way we're doing it, why we're not doing maybe some other things that some people would like to see us do, and all that. But we will get to that in due course. We will also be available for questions, and with that, let's get going. So, what would a land bank do for Plymouth? Well, it's a very good question. The land bank would provide a mechanism for buying land for the following uses. It would be open space, including passive and or active recreation, so that could be things like walking trails, that could be things like parks, conservation, as well as aquifer protection. Plymouth, for those that don't know, sits over a sole source aquifer, meaning all of our water is derived from this one specific source. So protecting the water in that source is vital to the future of our community, because if the water gets tainted, poisoned, contaminated in some way, it could be potentially very expensive to fix it, potentially impossible to fix it, and in either scenario, that would be very bad for the future of Plymouth. There are other benefits to open space that I will not bore you with, but things like squirrels and trees, they like having open space because that's where they live. We can all appreciate that. Next, of course, affordable housing. And when we say affordable housing, we are talking about affordable housing at 60% area median income, as opposed to the 80% that you're often seeing down here. So 80% area median income is kind of the standard that it has been around here for a while. The problem with that is that, if we were in the right area, then 80% might be fine. But we're counted in the same area for this purposes as places like Quincy, Cambridge, Boston, Braintree, places with a much more higher paying jobs, more developed economic base. So there, 80% is very different than down here. And down here, you're often paying, in an 80% area median income, $2,500 or more a month, which is very expensive for most people, and I would say, for all intents and purposes, not particularly affordable. But at 60%, you're actually more reflective of what would actually be affordable for Plymouth families or Plymouth individuals. You could also use it for municipal uses, schools, wells, fire stations, et cetera. Now, you can't build the structure with the land bank. The land bank is for the land. So you buy the land for a school, you buy the land for a fire station, but town meeting would still have to approve the funds for the school or for the fire station or for the wells. So we're just talking about the land, okay? But getting the land is a big cost in building those structures and acquiring those sort of parcels and those projects. So it still would help reduce the budget over time and increase our ability to respond to our ever-growing needs for services as our community continues to grow. And it would do all these things without raising taxes on residents, very important. How will it be funded? The buyer of real estate would pay a transfer fee of between 1% and 2% of the value of the property that they are buying. The Land Bank Commission can adjust that fee within those goalposts. So it could start at 2 and be titrated down like 0.25% over a few years down to 1. It could go all the way down to 1 if we had like something like 2008 happen again, or if we ever get to like build out and we have less pressing needs, or it could go up if we were in a recession, then we get out of it, things are going better. That ability to turn it up and down within those parameters makes a difference because we can respond to the economic conditions as well as the growth and development conditions in this community. We think of this as kind of like your initiation fee to the Club of Plymouth. So congratulations to all of you. In order to be on the Advisory and Finance Committee, you need to be a registered voter in Plymouth. So you must all live here, either in some place that you rent or someplace that you own. So you're in the club, or at least you're in a situation where you won't have to pay this fee right now, even if you're a renter. I know we have a recovering renter on the board, so I'm glad that she's going to get in under the wire now to pay this club because she's been around for a while. But if you, we think if you're in the club already, you don't need to pay the dues because you're already here. You're already paying your taxes, right? But if you're coming into the club and you're adding some strain in services because residential taxpayers tend to consume more services than they pay for, then we think it's only fair that you pay a little bit of an initiation fee, and that way we can respond to those growing needs as more people come in. Now, this would apply to real estate, so it would apply to residential as well as commercial. But the more land is sold, the more money the land bank will have for the purposes that we talked about on the prior slide. And we can adjust and adapt to growth as it continues to happen throughout our community, which I will remind you has been around for over 404 years, and we are still developing, which is impressive in and of itself. Are there exemptions? Well, there certainly are. There are notable exemptions that include, but are not limited to, affordable housing as defined by any town, state, or federal program, including the 80% AMI that we talked about earlier. That is affordable housing as defined by one of those entities or more than one of those entities, so that would count as being exempt. First-time home buyers, where all purchasers qualify. So if you and your spouse, for example, are buying a home, neither one of you has owned a home before, you both qualify for first-time home buyers. If you and your spouse are buying a house, but your wife, let's say, used to own a home and you didn't, then you don't qualify for this exemption because both of you are not first-time home buyers. Only one of you is. Interfamily transfers. You're selling property from one family member to another. I guess it should be intra-family transfers, but you get the idea. Charitable organizations. So, your Habitat for Humanities, your other charitable or 501c3s, and if they're acquiring land, we're not looking to charge them because they're doing other good work for the community. We're not as concerned about their drain on services because they're providing a benefit. Plymouth residents buying a new but not additional residence. So if you're moving from one Plymouth address to another Plymouth address permanently, fine. You're staying in the club. You're just changing where your locker is. But if you're buying another locker because you have too much stuff or you want to rent it out to make some money on Airbnb or something like that, well, that's a little outside of club rules. So we'd like you to just pay a little transfer fee. You can still do what you want. We're just looking for a little bit of money up front and you're going to be fine. And keep in mind, if you're buying a house, financing a house at 1 or 2% as an additional cost, that's not that much money to spread over a 30-year mortgage, right? So it's not that high of a price to pay for a lot of these folks. And if you have the money to buy an investment property, then you're the kind of person that can afford, in our opinion, to pay between 1 and 2%, whatever the Land Bank Commission decides. Now, there are these exemptions only apply if the property being purchased is the principal residence of the person applying for the exemption. So it only applies to residential properties. Now, I mentioned the commission on the last slide. Now, you're probably wondering, well, who are these commissioners? Well, it's a very good question. The Land Bank Commission will consist of 9 independent commissioners appointed by the following bodies. The Select Board would appoint 2. Town Meeting through the COPC would appoint 2. The Planning Board would appoint 2. The Affordable Housing Trust would appoint 1. The Open Space Committee would appoint 1. And the Land Use and Acquisition Committee would appoint 1. None of these bodies may appoint either their own members or any other elected official to the Land Bank Commission. So you're getting these are people who have certain objectives in the community about growth, development, affordable housing, open space preservation, the use of land in our community. But we want them to keep doing that important work themselves, but choose other people, qualified people in the community, to oversee this aspect. They can't appoint themselves or each other, and they can't appoint anybody like a town meeting member, a select board member, a planning board member. They can't appoint the moderator. They can't appoint somebody on the redevelopment authority. If you're an elected official in the town of Plymouth, you can't be appointed to it. We want you to be focused on this, and we want you to be independent. That independence is important, and we'll go over that a little bit later. So when I say a little bit later, I of course mean right now. The Land Bank's independence is a core feature. If the Land Bank's decisions were subject to approval by any other town entity, such as town meeting, the select board, planning board, etc., then it would be considered part of town government. And you don't want that because the Land Bank is special legislation, so it needs to be passed into law at the State House level. There have been prior proposals for land banks that have failed at the state level, that were less independent than the one we are proposing. They had more town involvement, more people from the town, existing town structures, town entities could be directly involved. And that was one of the reasons that those failed. So we want to learn from that, not repeat that mistake, not think, well, we think we're the anointed few. Others tried to do this, but we're going to try and do it and we'll be fine even though this other community wasn't. No, we want to learn from other people's mistakes. We don't want, again, the perfect to be the enemy of the good with projects like this. And we want to be able to get this passed through the legislature so that we can do the things that we're trying to do in our community to get a handle on growth and own the land so we can control the land. Now, the state is also very wary of proposals it views as being anti-housing. The affordable housing purpose plus the different appointing authorities are designed to assuage concerns that the land bank is anti-housing. You're seeing things like the MBTA Communities Law, the affordable housing initiatives by the government, the strains that we're seeing on our affordable housing system and our shelter system. So there's a significant objective on a state level to increase housing stock and not be anti-housing in any way. There's also a federal objective that's being talked about of also increasing affordable housing throughout the country. So being aware of the political landscape that we are at, both on a state and federal level, we think is intelligent and responsible. So that's why we are trying to make this not be anti-housing, but anti-overdevelopment, anti-overgrowth, and we're including this affordable housing purpose to make sure that people are well aware that this takes housing into account. It is not trying to push out housing. It's just trying to bring in the kind of housing we need, not the kind of housing that private developers, many of them, wish to create for us, which we're not looking to create, which is unaffordable houses that drive up the cost. Now, why do we need this if we have the CPC, you might ask yourself? Well, if you do find yourself asking yourself that, just remember what I'm about to say. That the land bank can operate outside the town meeting cycle. CPC cannot do that. Meaning the land bank can be more competitive in acquiring land from sellers who cannot wait for a town meeting. There's a town meeting in April, there's a town meeting in October. You can call a special town meeting, but that costs additional money. So we don't usually do that unless there's a specific purpose. And the last time the select board tried to call a special town meeting for the purposes of acquiring land, that did not succeed. So we have some strain and problems with having people meet our schedule. So if we have something that meets their schedule and the private entities can acquire property, can sell property when they need to sell it for the money that they need at that time. You have like somebody died, they have to clear out their estate. You have a business that's moving out of town, they need to wind down in a certain time frame. Allows the land bank to still be competitive in that front. The affordable housing here is more affordable than the CPC because it's at 60% AMI, which is more realistically affordable for Plymouth. We went over this earlier. CPC affordable housing is at 80%. It can be lower, like the Grantham project last time, but that's a choice. This is a mandate that it would have to be that 60% AMI. The municipal use purpose will leverage the town's growth to meet the needs created by that growth. More residents mean more wells, means we need more fire stations in more places, more schools in more places, et cetera, and et cetera. So this is a good way to let the growth itself fund the response to that growth in a responsible way that's not too onerous, that is really just an adjustment that lets the community grow within its means. The open space purpose will also leverage the town's growth to protect our aquifer and our environment, as we talked about earlier. So these are all things that work in complement to the CPC, not in contrast to. The CPC can still do CPC stuff. We're just going to do this stuff, and the town will be better with both entities doing their own thing on their own schedules in their own ways. So that is the end of my presentation. I am certainly available to answer any questions, as is the chair of the planning board, Mr. Steve Bolton, who is joining me here tonight. So any questions that you have, myself or Mr. Bolton can answer, and I will open it up to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Canty, for that very detailed. It kind of goes along with your theme of forward thinking, and
Thank you.
fits right in with that. So
I appreciate that.
we have some questions here, and I think Mr. Dunn, your hand came up first. You have the floor.
First of all, I want to say that I'm pretty sure I'm supporting this, but I do have a question.
Okay.
And I want to kind of use so I just bought a new house on less than a month ago for like $700,000. So are we saying that on the day that I bought my like tiny little 1,700 square foot house, that I would also have to pay an additional $14,000 to a land bank on that same day, that while I'm already putting a $140,000 down payment on a house, that we're gonna tack on $14,000 on top of that due in cash at the same time.
So there are a number, first things first, the list of exemptions that I read out was not
Well, I
exhaustive.
know that, I was
So-
already in Plymouth, I already owned a house, so it
Right.
wouldn't apply to me.
Right,
But
right.
say I was in Kingston and I was coming to Plymouth and I bought the same house.
Sure, sure. So assuming no exemption applied to you, it would be rolled into the cost, it would be due at that time, but it would be part of, that would be incorporated into the overall cost of the home. So if you're financing that home,
So it could be financed as like
correct,
part of.
it could be
okay.
part of that.
Okay,
Right, and if you're paying cash.
That's what I'm
If you're
asking.
lucky enough to be paying cash, then.
I'm not.
Yeah, you're gonna need, yeah, a lot of people aren't, except when I was buying a house, and there were a surprising number of people looking in West Plymouth and North Plymouth that were, but such is life. But if you're lucky enough to be paying in cash, then it's probably less of an issue. Maybe if you didn't have that cash, you'd finance just the 2%, which is over 30 years not gonna be that expensive.
excellent, that's what I was hoping the answer would be. Thank you.
There's also
Yeah,
one
I'm
other
sorry,
aspect.
could you identify yourself?
Certainly. Steve Bolton, Chair,
Thank you.
Planning Board. There's another aspect to this that didn't get mentioned. So in terms of the properties that are subject to the fee, the Land Bank Commission also has the ability to set a number as to the dollar amount that is subject to the fee. There is, in the legislation, the proposed legislation, there is a floor of $350,000. So any property under $350,000, no matter what, could never be.
Good luck.
Yeah, I know. Which is why, however, there is no ceiling set. So the Land Bank Commission, at any time, again, as Mr. Canty mentioned, based on market conditions, et cetera, can increase that number. So again, hypothetically, we have a horrible real estate crash. We have a problem. People are not going to buy homes in Plymouth if they have to pay this extra fee. The Land Bank Commission can turn around and say, we understand that. That's no problem. Now every home under $2 million is no longer subject to this. And we'll wait until market conditions change, and then we can lower that number back down. So it's not just subject to those exemptions, but there's an ability to be extra flexible. We want to make sure that, again, the purpose of this is not to impose a burden on anyone. It's so that those who can afford to contribute that little bit extra are doing so to offset the expenses that they are creating. Sort of a mini impact fee, if you will. But again, for those designed who can afford it. And that's the reason, as Mr. Canty again said, that we need that independence of a land bank commission that can act quickly based upon truly unusual circumstances. If we have another global situation in which all of a sudden the real estate market crashes because of unforeseen circumstances, whether that be man-made or natural disasters, we want to be able to be responsive and be able to turn around and immediately say, all right, we're getting together. That's it. We've decided the number is $2 million. The number is $5 million. There isn't a single home in Plymouth that will ever be subject to this if that's what they want to do. So that $700,000 number may or may not have fallen within, depending on what the Land Bank Commission decides is the market. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, Mr. Dunn?
No, I'm all set, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lawler, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin, nice job on the presentation.
Thank you.
I will be voting for this, but I have a question. What determines the difference between 1% or 2%?
The
why-
Land Bank Commission. So that's the range that they can set the rate at. They can go as high as 2, they could go as low as 1.
Is it per case or just like
No,
this
that's
year?
like that's their going rate. So then they could adjust it at a certain time and say, oh, it was 2, but that's a little high, we're going to go down to 1.5 or 1.75 or any number between, there's an infinite range of numbers between 1 and 2, so I don't need to belabor the point, but they could set it anywhere within those 2 goalposts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Green, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin, for a great presentation. I also watched the planning board presentation. One question I had is oversight of this huge amount of money. So you're looking at multi-million-dollar set of funds. Is there, and it's outside of town government, as
Correct.
we've said. So who is in charge of overseeing those funds? And is there an audit function or something like that?
So there is an audit function, and there's also the fact that the appointing authorities have the ability to remove, for certain delineated causes, anybody that they appointed. And that's important because some people are asking, like, well, why isn't this elected? Or why aren't the elected officials on this themselves? And I'm just going to break it to you. It's extremely hard. One would say impossible to remove an elected official in this community. You need a 20% quantum of vote, a 20% turnout, rather, of the registered voters in order to recall someone. So let's just say little old me. I decided the rest of my term on the select board, I'm going to just ignore the charter and do whatever I want every day. You could not reelect me, but good luck recalling me, because when we're trying to overturn and change the entire charter of the community, the Constitution of Plymouth, we can only get like 16% to show up. So we don't think that that's a particularly viable protection, because somebody like me, I'm elected for a 3-year term. Somebody like Mr. Bolton is elected for a 5-year term. So you get somebody on there that doesn't do a very good job. There's a period where they're completely immune from being recalled, which I think is a year. And then there's a signature requirement, a high quantum of vote. It's very, very, very challenging. I would say practically, as a practical matter, impossible to recall an elected official in this community. But by having the elected officials who want to get reelected or move on to other things be the people that get the ability to directly or indirectly appoint these people, because you have your select board, your planning board, you have your open space committee that are not elected, but they're appointed by elected officials. By having them have the ability to remove people for cause, it can be more responsive, it's quicker, it's a known process that's delineated, it's fair because it's by these delineated processes, not just arbitrarily like, oh, I don't like this person. We think that's a better system than having it be made up of elected officials. Does that completely answer your question, or do you have any follow-ups?
As far as financial oversight outside of recalling somebody for malfeasance, we have X dollars in the fund, and, you check the bank statement and nobody's writing checks to themselves kind of thing.
Yes, so there is a requirement that the Land Bank Commission have somebody who's a financial person who's responsible for that. That is a report that's provided not only to the town, but actually the Secretary of Environment, who is a de facto non-voting member of the commission itself. So those reports go not just to the town, but also to the state. Just so you understand, a lot of this form was taken based upon our existing land banks in Massachusetts. Those are Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. So we didn't completely reinvent the wheel, especially when it came to those things. We made sure that we were following the regulations and the form that has already at least been approved a couple of times by the state legislature and by the governor. So we know that those things work because they are in process now, and they've been working for 40 years. This is just a different approach because we are adding the affordable housing component and the municipal component, something that no other land bank in the country has done. I've contacted many of them throughout. They do one or the other. Nobody has tried all three. And again, as the chair indicated, this is definitely a forward-thinking approach. We're trying to create a land bank that is uniquely suited to the needs of Plymouth now and as we are clearly developing. So yes, there is financial oversight that goes above and beyond just we're hoping that you're going to follow the rules. There will absolutely be both town and state review of the finances to make sure that everything is absolutely followed by the letter of the law.
Great, thank you.
Okay, yes, Mr. Malaguti, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I do have a few questions. So first, as it was stated that it's basically No local government is tied in with this. But under the finances page of section 8.1.1, it says funds appropriated, borrowed, or transferred to be deposited into the fund by town meeting. So that means that government isn't eradicated from this, that town meeting is still involved within this. Is that correct?
That's, they borrow. You can answer that.
There are two instances in which that can occur. It's not a mandate, but, so for example, there are certainly instances in which the land bank may collaborate with the town on a project. So, for example, the CPC says, listen, we'd like to fund some affordable housing. The land bank says, great, we have land you can actually use to build that affordable housing on. The project is decided that is best because of whatever numbers to go through the land bank versus the CPC. The town and town meeting would still, of course, have to vote to appropriate that monies, but that money could then be transferred to the land bank by the town in order to accomplish that agreed goal. The other alternative is there are instances in which the land bank may ask the town to back the land bank. It's not something that's contemplated as happening often, but it is allowed. And again, this was something we took from the existing legislation. So if there's an instance in which the land bank says, look, there's an unusual circumstance, we have a giant parcel, maybe the Holtec property, and they're saying, combined with the town and us, there's a certain amount of money that we have together, but we need to borrow extra to get that. The land bank is empowered to borrow just as the town is, but if the land bank needs the town's backing, then the town must approve that. The land bank cannot bind the town. It is an independent entity. But again, under those circumstances, there can be funds transferred from the town into the land bank. That's the only reason that that's there. It doesn't create a separate obligation on the part of the town.
Thank you. And also with that, the 8.1 on that, where it says that the dedicated fund would be set up as a revolving fund or sinking account, that would be based upon the commission, not based upon town meeting approval for expending from a revolving fund if it's held within the town?
Correct. No, this is solely based upon, again, it's as an independent body, it maintains its own independent accounts as a revolving fund. It does not maintain any joint accounts with the town. Again, the whole point was to make sure that as an independent body, it is not able to bind the town, nor is it subject to the town. And that's what the state has required of land banks in the two that it is approved. It has made sure that this independent body is there and that it does function independently, even though it is tied to the government as a related entity, much like we have some others in this town that do that, like the Economic Development Foundation, for example. They're related to the town, but they are independent bodies. They operate independently, their funds are independent. They can have joint obligations by agreement only. But again, those agreements would be subject to approval through the select board and the town meeting process.
Thank you. And one other that I have is under 4.2 bonds and notes. And this is just a generic one. What if the commission ever failed to perform for the bonds and notes that they are asking for, how would the funds be recovered to pay off those bonds and notes? Would it be if the assets were under the value that the bonds and notes?
That is, again, as an independent body, the land bank is solely obligated. There's no commitment on the part of the town. The town doesn't, unless the town has voted to guarantee something, the town is never subject to liability. It is an independent obligation of that entity. It's, again, one of the reasons why the likelihood of doing large expenditures for borrowing is limited. But for the most part, you would literally be looking at it the way anyone else would do. It would be based upon the assets of the land bank. The land bank would use its land to secure the borrowing for other purposes, for those bonds or notes. But obviously, as a regulated entity, it can only do those for the express purposes that we've set forth. So you couldn't just sort of say, we want to do a bond to generally have more money in our accounts. We would literally have to do it based upon a specific need that was approved.
Thank you. And if I can just ask one question of the chair. I'm going to give up for any other members, but I do have one more question if I could come back at the
Sure.
end. Thank you.
I believe Mr. Snyder had a question. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of the Community Preservation Act. I think it's great. This is kind of similar to it. I'm a little bit troubled by a $10,000 addition to a $500,000 purchase. I think that could have some negative effects on purchasing. I'm not sure. But one thing that I do want to get an explanation of, because I assume this is really to help build some money and get some land and do some good things. But why is 4.13 talking about eminent domain? Why is that even part of this?
One moment. Well, so eminent domain, you can do a public taking for public use or public benefit. So even though it's independent from the government as much as it can be, it is still a quasi-governmental agency, an entity. So there may be instances where the land bank, for the benefit of the entire community, would want to initiate some type of an eminent domain taking from a private landowner. But we would find that to be a rare exception, a very, very rare exception. Eminent domain is frowned upon generally in the community, as well as unpopular with the people that are directly being affected by it. But you're passing legislation. The thing with this is you're passing legislation to go up to the State House. It's going to take 18 months to 2 years to get passed on Beacon Hill, and then it can take effect shortly thereafter. And you can make amendments and adjustments to it through that same process, but those amendments and adjustments are also slow in that same way. They would also take that same time frame. So we're trying to anticipate not just likely things that would happen, but things that may happen that we may want a land bank commission to have the ability to do. But just because the land bank commission would have the ability to potentially, in a remote situation, do eminent domain, that would not be the anticipated use of that clause.
Yeah.
Let me just clarify. So when you look at 4.13, it is recommend to the town to take interest. The Land Bank Commission does not have the authority to do eminent domain on its own. It does not. It can only recommend to the town. It could say to the town, we think that this would be a good idea for the town to do for part of a project. As Mr. Hartman pointed out to me just a moment ago, there are instances in which the town does that just to clear title on a property. So for example, in the event that a property is available, but there's questions about title, the town will, on instance, take it by eminent domain, which guarantees that title becomes clear. It doesn't mean that the landowner loses anything, but that's the circumstance. But just to be clear, again, it says recommend to the town to take interest. The Land Bank Commission itself does not have the authority to initiate any land taking.
I understand that. I read it, and I know what it says. I'm just saying that I don't think that's necessary in the wording of this article. I think it should be expunged, because this is supposed to be income revenue for the town on a sale of something, not going after someone else's money. I don't like that. I find it offensive, and I don't think that it's necessary. That's just my opinion.
And this, just so this was specifically a provision that is in the existing land banks. So again, part of that reasoning that was kept there is because there has clearly been shown a need to be able to clear title. So again, I do understand your issue, but that is not the intent of the land bank.
Okay, Ms. Richards, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just because this happens to be my area of expertise, the Registry of Deeds. So for every deed that is recorded in Plymouth, they will have to first go to the land bank, obtain a certificate saying that the land bank has approved it and vetted them, and then also record a certificate along with their deed saying as such. And the county is now also going to be keeping those funds and then transferring them from the treasurer, Plymouth County treasurer, over to, this has all gone through the county. I can't, good luck.
Yes. Yeah, that's how it's
Yeah.
done in other
No,
communities.
I know, that's how it's done in the state, with the state registries, but.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
things are always different in the county. But I do agree with this. I'm for the land bank. I think it's a great idea. Register D. Oliveira in Nantucket, I've spoken with him, and he's a big advocate. So thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Howard, the floor is yours.
Thank you for explaining the independent nature of the governing board. I've heard from more than one town meeting member that they are very concerned about being cut out of the approval process for acquisitions by the town.
Mm-hmm.
How would you assuage their fears?
Well, I guess there's a variety of reasons that they may have those types of fears. I would point out to the fact that, as I said during the presentation, like, we often, members of the select board, members of the planning board, are often given questions about, why are you allowing this project to happen? Why are you allowing this land to be bought by this private developer and used for this purpose? Why is this going over here? The reason that we can't do that is because we can't respond quickly enough to the open market to react to some of these things. So if town meeting members have those types of concerns, this is one way to address it, to address these limited purposes, open space, affordable housing, municipal use, that still preserves town meeting authority in all the other areas it already has. Town meeting also still has the authority at the end of the day, say the land bank says this would be an excellent location for a new fire station. The fire department would still have to go to town meeting and say, well, we have this land that somebody or somebody's thought would be an excellent piece of land for a fire station. Do you guys agree or not? And if they said no, then a fire station can't be built there, and then it would have to be used for some other purpose within the land bank, like affordable housing or like open space. So town meeting is still involved in aspects of the process, significant aspects of the process. But we need to be responsive, and we need to be able to compete with the people that are actually making the decisions for this community, which are private landowners and private developers. We also need to get it passed at the State House, and having town meeting directly involved in it would kill it, because it's killed it elsewhere. So again, we don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. This is something that, yes, it's outside town meeting intentionally, but it's outside it for a specific purpose that's meeting a need that we know we have in this community. And town meeting still gets final authority on additional expenditures that would come along with any of these purposes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll go back to Mr. Malaguti. Mr. Pizarro, would you like to take the floor?
Through the chair, thank you, Kevin.
You're
Mr.
welcome.
Canty, Mr. Bulletin, for your presentation. Just to get to the financial part of this, any forecasts on what 1% would bring in to the commission?
So I know we've done some back of the napkin math that's ranged like 7 to... 1% we estimated it would be about $7 million. So if it was 2, it would be about 14. But that's not factoring in a litany of exemptions, including the floor that all the properties could potentially have, which could significantly eat into that total amount. CPC, which is the most direct comparable right now, is getting like somewhere between 4 and 4.2 a year. That's from both the fees it gets itself as well as the state match. But we would estimate that it would be at least at the CPC level, probably more. But as those things adjust, we can adjust the Land Bank Commission can adjust the 1.2, the 1 and 2 down or within those goalposts. And it can also adjust that floor number so that if the money is flowing in and there's not enough uses for it, they could turn off the spout. But then I think at the beginning, certainly, you're going to see a lot of needs. And there's going to be a lot of things that the commission wants to see done, a lot of acquisitions that's going to want to do. But I don't think as we approach build out and as we control growth using the land bank and manage that growth and direct it to places with infrastructure, I think some of those needs will decrease. But you're always going to have needs for municipal facilities. You're always going to have some needs for affordable housing. So I don't think it'll ever go to zero, but I think the needs will be greatest at the beginning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Malaguti, the floor is back to you.
Thank you. So with the commission, and as it was just stated, if it was gifted as a piece of land or a parcel of land that would be great for this objective for the town meeting would still basically weigh in saying, yes, we like that, or no, we don't like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
But in the actual process of I believe it's 2/3 commission vote for deciding an idea of what they want,
Mm-hmm.
is the commission still applicable to open meeting and the meetings will be public, or is it closed off?
It would be an open meeting.
So the public so the public would be allowed, if they were abutters to the parcel and everything, be allowed to say, we don't believe this is the best intention for the town and our livelihoods, or that we agree that this is. Okay.
Yes.
That was a concern that I had. I just wanted to make sure that was clarified so that it wouldn't be so autonomous that
No, it's not
there wouldn't be any
Right.
outreach effort or.
Right, it's not
public
it's
input.
not a smoke-filled backdoor room. It's an open process. They're going to outline their own policies and procedures as part of but they would be subject to open meeting law and other provisions, and they would be known in the community for who they are, so you could reach out to them the same way you can reach out to you folks, or you can reach out to members of the select board, the planning board, and say, hey, I'm an abutter, over here, and I have an opinion about this. That would be at a bare minimum, you'd be able to do that, and you may be able to have public comment at the beginning and end of the meetings, like here. You may be able to do it at the select board at the end, or in relation to any agenda item, like some boards and committees do. I will point out that public meetings are outlined in 3.10, that all Land Bank Commission meetings shall be subject to the terms of the state open meeting law. It's the second 3.10, so we should correct that. But it should be 3.11, but it's currently the second 3.10.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to give Scott, your digital hand is up on the Zoom. Could you please identify yourself and your address, and the floor is yours.
Hey, Scott Navarro, 25 Sweet Amanda's Way, Plymouth, Mass. Thank you for the presentation. I do have two questions. Are there any limits on any of the 3 tranches that you could purchase from the land bank on how many funds you could spend on it? Or can you put 100% towards affordable housing?
So you could put 100% in a given year towards affordable housing, or for a number of years as a commission towards affordable housing, for an instance. The CPC has requirements of 10, 10, and 10 for 3 of their 4 designated uses. This one does not, so that the flexibility is there to respond to the needs in the community. So right now, we're seeing a need for affordable housing in a significant way that I think our current structures, our CPC and our Affordable Housing Trust, are not able to meet at the level that we'd like to see. We also know in the near future we're going to need some more schools, some more fire stations and facilities, potentially in the 10 years or so out, we might need an annex or a substation of the police department. And so that's municipal uses. And there's always, of course, desire for some open space in this community. We have entities currently working on open space, but having another entity to be able to work on it as well could only augment that. Those needs, though, the balance of those needs that the community has at any given time will change over time, and we want the land bank to be as flexible as possible to adjust to those needs and changes as they occur.
Okay, the CPC doesn't have maximums. I think it's just 10% minimums of funds have to be spent on
But
those certain
that
items.
does, by its
Does
nature,
the,
create a maximum for the other uses.
yeah, is there any forecasting or budgeting that the land bank's gonna do, considering that, hey, we know we're gonna need a fire station in 3 years, so we're not gonna do affordable housing because that's gonna be an immediate need for the town? Or we're gonna need another municipal building? Or do they just spend all the funds annually every year?
So they would be making decisions not only in the near term, but in the medium and the longer term as well. They're responsible for their own, to manage their own funds, including their own like credit rating and bond rating, independent of themselves. They can only, if they go to the town to get backing, they need to ask town meeting permission for that. So if they're looking to themselves borrow money, they'd have to demonstrate responsibility through their assets. So they might do, like you might get a commission on there that decides they want to save as much money as they can for a while towards like the Holtec parcel, which when we negotiated the pilot, we estimated if the whole 1,530.35 acres were to go on the market that day, back in August of last year, it would have cost between $35 and $50 million in 2023 dollars. So it's possible that they would want to put some or all of their money away towards a purchase like that. They also might be forecasting things like expanding wellheads, municipal facilities like school or fire stations. They would be responsible for that, and that type of financial planning would not only be relevant to their appointment as individuals by the people that appoint them, but also by setting their own policies and procedures when they're on there as well.
All right, thank you. Just one more question. You mentioned earlier that the land bank does not need town meeting approval, but the CPC needs town meeting approval to purchase land. But according to Article 9, it appears that they could just give money to affordable housing developers and don't need town approval for that?
Are you
Is that
talking
how that
about
works?
the CPC giving money to affordable housing developers? Who are you asking about giving money to affordable housing developers?
You, so the land bank does not need a town meeting to purchase stuff. The CPC can't purchase land, but they can just give money to developers to develop affordable housing without getting town approval?
No, the CPC requires town meeting approval to do that.
They do, okay. All right, thanks.
The CPC makes recommendations, and all the checks have to be signed by town meeting.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. And that's because of how the Community Preservation Act was written and enacted by the legislature of the Commonwealth and accepted by the community. We are looking to
All right, thank you.
go above and beyond that with this. You're welcome.
Okay, seeing and hearing no further questions, I will entertain a motion to approve Article 17. Yeah, I'm going to make the motion to approve, and then you can come in. To approve this, as is. Okay.
I'm going to make a motion to approve this article with the exception of 4.13.
Second.
Okay, any discussion about that change? No? Okay. Hearing and seeing no discussion. The motion on the table is to delete section 4-13. 4-13. Okay, so we will vote on whether we want to approve Article 17, however, deleting section 4.13. Yes, do you have a question? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Mr. Bolton and Mr. Canty for bringing this forward. I think it's something that we've needed for a long time, and I know it's something that you two, along with a bunch of other people, have been discussing for a long period of time. We've looked at other communities who have done similar things and other communities who have found other ways to provide land for affordable housing or for public uses, and I think this is one of the ways that we can put affordable housing where we want it and kind of avoid some of these 40B situations. So I just want to thank you guys for doing all of the work on this and putting this forward, and I think this will help us going forward for our municipal buildings, but also for affordable housing, which is obviously one of our biggest issues right now. So thank you. I'll be voting for this.
Okay, Mr. Howard, the floor is yours.
There are many aspects of this proposal that I, on the surface, find very attractive. So thank you for your presentation, your efforts on this. I do, however, think that town meeting will have serious concerns about their lack of approval authority in the proposed land bank. So it should be a very interesting town meeting when we get to this article. So thank you.
Okay, over to Ms. Richards. The floor is yours.
I definitely support the land bank. I think we have lost too many pieces of property by having to wait for town meeting. Opportunities arise, they arise quickly. The town has not been able to take advantage of those opportunities and picked up, by picking up pieces of property, and we've lost them to developers. So I think this is a great article. I'm kind of on the fence with the 4.1.3, although I tend to agree with my colleague, Mr. Snyder, that we shouldn't be using this for land taking. However, I will just put out there that there are hundreds of pieces of property in the southern part of Plymouth that have not been able to be taken, have not been able to be transferred because they are stuck. And there isn't a title examiner in the world that has been able to unstuck them, has not been able to get through them, get past them. So they are sitting there, people have just been sitting, living on them, and they don't own them. They're just taking advantage of them. So I'm kind of on the fence on that, but I would like to see this article pass. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Yes, Mr. Malaguti.
Thank you. I am cautiously optimistic on this. I do want to see a land bank come to fruition. I still have some concerns, but those are outweighed by the positives at the moment. Please do not let my concerns actually become reality. I am going to vote in support of this, and hopefully town meeting does the same due diligence that we did tonight. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Tompkins, the floor is yours.
This may be a question that could or not be answered at this portion yet. So with the 4.1.3 section, if we omit that section, would it lessen our chances of this passing at the state level?
I'm going to part with procedure and let Mr. Canty answer this.
Well, thank you, Ms. Tompkins. So a couple of things. So you're making a recommendation to town meeting that could form the basis of the main motion made by Mr. Neerman at the podium. But you're only making that recommendation. Town meeting would have to vote on that main motion. So you're not directly amending it. You're just recommending that an amendment be made to it, just for clarification. Now, as Ms. Richards points out, there are some instances where not having the ability to use this to clear title would mean that we could try and purchase something that'd be very valuable for one or more of these designated uses that we're unable to do because we don't have that specific authority to do so. So I think I think that's something to consider. Whether the state would say, because you can't do that in that instance, we don't want you to be able to do any of these things, I guess it's kind of looking in a crystal ball, but I would say the state would probably be okay with us giving up that authority. Not to say that you should, just to answer your question, I think it could still pass at the State House if we couldn't clear title in that way.
Thank you.
Ms. Richards, the floor is back to you.
Just for clarification, for somebody who's been at the registry for over 30 years, back when Dream World was a dream, I remember there was a dozen title examiners working on hundreds of pieces of parcels of land and trying to clear those titles, and they were unable to clear those titles. So they remain unclear. So if they are able to be taken by eminent domain, so it's not that we're taking somebody's land, it's we're clearing these titles up by taking them by eminent domain. We're not taking someone's land because they're not owned by anybody. So I'm just kind of clarifying that. Thanks.
Any other discussion before we vote on Article 17, Sans, Section 4.13? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Ms. Butler?
Mr. Chairman, can you just clarify for us, if we approve this motion, then we will not, that will be at the end of it, it will go to town meeting?
Correct. We are recommending to town meeting by voting to approve the motion on the table, we're recommending town meeting approve this article without the verbiage on 4.13.
And if we vote no,
Then we
and
come
vote
back
that
and put,
down, we could potentially come back to this and
oh, we
vote.
will. We'll come back and we'll put the motion back on the table to approve it as a whole,
In
its entirety.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm going to go to the master here.
So, sorry, Mr. Neerman, but you could make a motion to amend to restore the omitted language, which would give you a bellwether as to whether there is critical mass in the committee to restore the language that Mr. Snyder's main motion has stricken. It would need to be made and seconded, and then you would be back to a main motion where you're approving the language as originally presented with no recommended edits. Or you could do what Mr. Neerman suggests.
Okay, are we all squared away on what we're voting on? Okay, here we go. Ms. Butler, how do you vote?
No.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
No.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Malaguti?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
No.
Ms. Richards?
No.
Mr. Snyder? Yes. And Ms. Tompkins?
No.
Six approve, 5 oppose, 0 abstentions. So we recommend to town meeting to adopt Article 17 without 4.13.
Mr. Chairman, I think this sends the wrong message to town meeting.
Well, this is what this committee just voted for.
Could the presenter request that you make a motion to reconsider so that I think some people may have voted no because of the omission of 4.1.3. Some people may have voted no because they are opposed to the land bank with or without 4.1.3.
I would make a motion to reconsider. I'm on
I'll
the prevailing side.
Okay? So we're going to go through the vote again.
You only need
Yeah, you only need one.
the seconder does not need to be on the prevailing side.
Okay, so again, is everybody clear what we're voting on here? We are voting, by voting yes, you are recommending to town meeting to send this Article 17 to town meeting without Section 4.13. That is a yes vote. If you vote no, you are rejecting sending this article to town meeting.
Well, first, you're going to vote on a motion to reconsider, which would undo the
Well,
vote.
Okay, so, well, we have a motion to reconsider, okay. All right, let's go through the vote.
Is there any discussion on that?
Sure.
Well, I'd like to discuss it, because I think that people are in the wrong direction here. This article is for a land bank for a fee paid by buyers of real property in Plymouth. They're not going to be selling properties if they don't have titles to it. The whole thing, this whole thing is like off the wall. There's no reason for this to be in this for a land bank for sales and buyers of real property. If you're buying a property, you're going to be charged 1% or 2%. This has nothing to do at all with this. People, I don't know where this is coming from, because it's incorrect, and it's unnecessary.
Back to Ms. Richards.
I think what we're discussing now is just to reconsider our vote and not the article itself.
That's part of the reconsideration, the reason for it.
Okay, well, let's vote to reconsider. That's where we are at this point. So a vote for yes is to reconsider the previous vote. A no is to reject the reconsideration and keep the previous vote intact. Are we clear? Yes, excellent. Okay, Ms. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Malaguti,
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro,
Yes.
Ms. Richards,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
No.
and Ms. Tompkins.
Yes.
So it's a 10-4, 1 against, 0 abstentions. So we have voted to reconsider the original motion. Any more discussion? Okay, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Can I have a new motion?
Can you clear up, can you make that motion clear?
So I would,
We're going back to the original motion that was put on the table by Mr. Snyder.
no,
Which-
you're
No.
actually not.
No, you
His,
just voted that way. So you need a new motion with
Yes.
the original article.
my recommendation would be to have a
Clean slate.
a recommendation to approve as presented, and a second, and then somebody could make a motion to amend
Got it.
consistent with Mr. Snyder's recommendation if they would like. Then that would get a separate vote, and then we'd be left with the main motion as amended or as unamended, and then you could vote on that.
Okay, so having said that, we are voting now to approve Article 17 in its entirety. So I think I need a motion for this. Yes. Mr. Howard, would you like to move to approve Article 17 in its entirety?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Mr. Dunn has seconded the motion. Any more discussion? Okay, so a yes vote is recommending that we pass this.
You could open it up to discussion if you were
Well,
inclined.
we did.
You're not
I did open
required
it for
to.
discussion. There was no discussion. Okay, so no discussion. We are voting now on whether to approve Article 17 in its entirety and pass that along to town meeting. A vote yes is to approve it, a vote no is to reject it. Ms. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Malaguti,
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro,
Yes.
Ms. Richards,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
and Ms. Tompkins.
Yes.
Okay, so we have approved by a vote of 11 to 0 to recommend to town meeting passage of Article 17. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton and Mr. Canty. Okay, so now we go to Article 18. Do we have a select board member? Oh, it's going to be Ms. Barrett. Okay, so Article 18, to accept Mass General Law, Chapter 203C, prudent investment, to see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 203C, and to authorize the treasurer, custodian of the town's trust funds, Chapter 44, Subchapter 54, and Subchapter 55, 55A, and 55B of the general laws, as amended, to invest and reinvest the monies of such fund in accordance with the prudent investor rule established under Chapter 203C of the Massachusetts General Laws, or take any other action relative thereto. I'm going to turn the floor over to our finance director, Ms. Barrett.
So I think our treasurer collector, Patty Meechan, is on
She is.
audio. On the
Good evening.
Hello.
I
could you
do
please
apologize
identify
tonight. I
yourself?
don't have access to the camera on the computer, so it will just be audio this evening.
Okay. Can you
so
identify
tonight-
yourself, please? Can
I'm
you
sorry?
identify yourself? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. So tonight we are requesting for advisory and finance to approve, to authorize the treasurer as custodian of the trust funds to invest and reinvest in accordance with the prudent investor rule. There was a recent provision to this law that would now allow cities and towns to adopt a local option for flexibility and further diversification of investments. Currently, we are allowed to invest according to the Mass Legal List, which is a list of 22 names of stocks, which is comprised of consumer staples, healthcare, utilities, and industrials. The only tech stock that is included in the Mass Legal List is Hewlett-Packard. This provision would allow us to invest in additional tech stocks and energy. The only accounts that this provision would affect would be the perpetual care and scholarship funds. This would not apply to stabilization funds or any other funds that are funded by taxpayer dollars. Adopting this local option does not mean that we are required to, but we would have that option and flexibility to do so. I would like to just add that our investment management group does recommend that we adopt this provision. And I would like to just mention that this was presented to the Board of Selectmen last week, and it was approved by them.
Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. Let's see, Mr. Pizarro, would you care to make a motion to approve Article 18?
So moved.
Thank you so much. Ms. Tompkins, could you please second that motion?
Second.
So we have a first from Mr. Pizarro and a second from Ms. Tompkins. Do we have any discussion on Article 18? Hearing and seeing none, let's go for the vote. Ms. Butler, how do you vote on Article 18?
Yes.
And Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Malaguti?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
That is 11 for, 0 against, and 0 abstentions. So the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends to town meeting to pass Article 18. Thank you so much, Ms. Barrett. Appreciate that. And Ms. Meekum.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to take an article out of order just because, just to resolve something very quickly so we don't hold up. It's Article 32, which is the citizens petition by Mr. DiNardo, and I believe you're in the back, right? So I did get some clarification now from the town moderator, and his recommendation to me, to you, is that you'll need to submit a new petition for next town meeting, because we can't just change something, we just can't change it into a bylaw. So that's the word of the town moderator. So you're gonna have to take that up with him, but that was his recommendation. I just didn't want you to sit here through the rest of this meeting just to get them. Okay, that's fine. Okay, we're going to Article 9, which was on the CPC schedule last week, but I thought it was very important that we have the developer here, as opposed to last week when we would not have been able to have him. So here we have the chair of CPC, as we will always call him, Chief Ed Bradley, and we have Rick Veo from the developer. So Article 9 is the CPC Housing South Landing Apartments, Magrico, Inc., to see if the town will vote to appropriate, transfer, and/or borrow from the community preservation funds the sum of $3 million or $3.2 million to grant to Magrico for the purposes of constructing 24 affordable deed-restricted housing units on the property located at 131 and 133 South Street, Plymouth, shown on Assessor's Map 27 as lots 14D and 14E, and further to authorize the Select Board to accept an affordable housing restriction pursuant to General Law, Chapter 44B, Subchapter 12, and General Law, Chapter 184, Subchapter 31 through 33, at 131 and 133 South Street, Plymouth, Mass., or take any other action thereto. So I'm turning the floor over to Mr. Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, members of the public that are on the TV or in public. My name is Ed Bradley. I am the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. As you said, I was here last week to present the articles that we had recommended for fall annual town meeting, with the exception of Article 9, because the petitioner was not available. So I thank you for rescheduling this so that he could be here to answer questions and give a proper presentation. There was a question last week, though, that I wanted to answer before we went any further. At some point in time, we were talking last week about affordable housing, and we asked how many units would we need to build in order to hit that 10% mark. Well, I was able to go find a housing production plan from the town of Plymouth. Now, this is from December of last year, so it's about 9 months old, but it's fairly accurate from what I could be able to tell from town staff. There are 28,353 housing units in the town of Plymouth. So to get the 10%, we would need 2,836. Right now, we have 1,916 units, and we're at 6.82%. I think last week I told you we're at 6.88. I apologize. It's 6.82%. So if my math is correct, we're short right now about 920 affordable units that would get us that 10% mark and get us away from the 40B.
Okay, but isn't the number of, for lack of a better word, unaffordable units going up as well? Isn't that a moving target?
As new homes get final certificate of occupancies and people move in, yes, those numbers are changing on a regular basis.
Okay,
So that, yes, we're always going to be trying to catch up with that total number. But that was as of December of 2023, just to give you an idea of where we are.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, and with that, I'd like to turn this over to Rick Vale, who is the petitioner for this article.
I'm not sure what the next slides are. Do you?
Oh, sure.
No, you don't. Yeah. Rick Veo from Magrico. Thank you again to the board for rescheduling this. I was away last week and couldn't make that meeting. I'm sure, as you've seen in your packet, the details of this proposal. This is another proposal that Meg Ryko is trying to collaborate with either the CPC or the Affordable Housing Trust. I think over the last 5 years, we've had 3 or 4 projects that we've made that same type of collaboration. It's been extremely successful. I give Bill Cohane a lot of credit for the initial work with me on that to sort of work that model out back on the original project, which was State Road, and bring in the Affordable Housing Trust, and it's worked very well. We've built, I can say, more voluntary affordable houses, affordable units than all other developers combined in the town of Plymouth, which I think is a statement. And I think these types of projects are one of the only things other than a 40B that are actually moving us forward in that, because as you mentioned, it's a moving target. We're constantly building new projects. The most we can hope for usually is that the developer is building 10%, so we're just staying equal. With these types of projects that we're committing either all or a very large portion of the project to affordable, it helps it on the way. 24 seems like a somewhat insignificant number, but it isn't to the 24 people who occupy these, and from what we see from applications, there's a great need. So this particular parcel is located directly across the street from the library. It's a small 1-acre parcel, currently has a 2-family on it. It is zoned multifamily. We've spoken with the planning department and members of the planning board, got input from the fire department, and do not see necessarily any objections to this. It seems like a good spot for it. On the right of that locus map, you have another development, which is I believe a nursing home assisted living facility with a much higher density. The next property down is owned by the Housing Authority, again, a fairly high density. And if you go to the left of that, you'll see other developments that are, again, very high density. So it's an appropriate use of the land in that particular spot. What really brought our attention to this piece is that it's going to be developed as something, not necessarily by us, but by someone. Chances are it would just go as market rate units. We saw an opportunity to partner with CPC again and or Affordable Housing Trust and bring units to a very unique spot. This particular spot has easy access to downtown. It has easy access to the P&B bus. It's easy access to shopping. It's on the Gatra line. It's right around the corner from schools. It's right around the corner from medical. And there's a fair amount of job opportunities within even walking distance to this, which is unique in the town right now. And there are very few pieces left, as I think is not here anymore, but Mr. Hartman would confirm, that are zoned multifamily that allow for this type of development by right, and we're not trying to pop them into a small residential neighborhood. So that being said, we came forward to the CPC looking for support in building this project. We were looking for approximately $130,000 a unit, with the developer, myself, and team putting in the rest of the funds to bring this forward. As I'm sure some of you know, we have typically managed these projects. I built, owned, and managed these projects long-term. We pride ourselves on saying that, we own a lot of properties in town, and we could go from a very high-end property, like, say, the Bradford down on the waterfront or the Mount Pleasant School apartments, or to one of our affordable housing projects, like the one on State Road, and no one would know the difference. They're beautifully maintained. They fit nicely into the community. We run them by the same exact standards that we run any of our properties, and I think they've been, extremely well received, and it's been a great use of CPC funds and has done a lot of good. This particular property, we proposed as an 80%, and we did that because, from what we've seen in the applications, anyone that would require the 60% qualification, at least, again, I'm going to say again that based on our applications that we see coming across our desk and are then forwarded to our SEB Housing Authority that qualifies people, we have seen that those people, 95% of the time have vouchers. So it wouldn't have mattered if it was 60 or 80%. And doing the 80, we were able to ask the CPC for less money. And that's why we proposed it. And we think it works, and it's worked well on the other properties we've done. So that is the 50,000-foot view of this project. I'm more than happy to answer any and all questions about it. But we are very pleased to bring it forward and think it's another very positive part of the partnerships we've developed with Affordable Housing Trust and CPC.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Veo, for that presentation and for the work you've done in this town to make it a better place. Mr. Howard, I saw your hand is up. The floor is yours.
Mr. Veo, thank you for coming this evening. I didn't understand your response, 60% versus 80% AMI and the vouchers. Can you explain that further, please?
So there's thresholds that someone will fall into to qualify, right? So we have to, any application that comes in, we have an outside agency that qualifies that person. It used to be the town, but they don't get involved in that for the most part anymore. So we have an outside agency, and there's a swath that someone would have to fall in, whether it's at 60% or 80% in terms of what they make, and not necessarily not just make above that, but make below that as well. You have to fit into a fairly narrow swath so that approximately 30% of your income is spent on that housing unit. If you fall below, then you're considered that you couldn't afford to live there. I mean, if you fell above, then you do not qualify at all. But if the income falls below, then you're considered not to be able to afford that. So what we've seen on these applications is that anyone that was applied, again, about 92, 93% of the people that have applied, if they fell below, they had a voucher anyway, and we were able to still put them in that unit because many of the people who are applying for the units have vouchers, and it historically, at least, that's what we've seen.
Help me out here. What does the voucher do for them?
So the voucher basically, it's a federal or potentially a state voucher that pays the rent or a portion of the rent. So that is tacked on to their income to be able to justify affording that unit. So whether the rent had been 60% AMI or whether it had been 80% AMI, it necessarily wouldn't have changed the outcome of their application. That's not to say there aren't people who would hit the 60% and have no voucher, and that would now become a more affordable unit. But we tried to balance out what we looked at in terms of the history and the applications we've had, coupled with just the demographics and who we see applying.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Pizarro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Vero. Just one question. Forecasting the rent for these one-bedroom apartments, what is the 80% AMI going to, what is that rent going to be?
So right now, if the way we typically run them is we take out utilities. So we take the max, we take what the maximum is, deduct the utilities, and then go from there. So right now, they allow approximately, let's call it 22 and change or 2,300. You're deducting about 100, 150, so you're down into the 21-something range for that. Now, we don't have a single affordable unit that we manage right now that we charge the maximum. We're typically below that. We can, and it allows for it to get to that if our expenses rose or whatnot, but we've found we've been able to stay below that maximum level. In some cases, substantially below, but in many cases, it might be $75 to $100 below, which means means a lot. So it's worked out well.
So if I can echo back, the rent on these at the maximum would be about $2,100 per month.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's again with utilities paid by the tenant to get to that, 22 and change number.
Okay, Mr. Malaguti, the floor is yours.
So echoing on that, what is your minimum that you usually charge? Because you said that you rarely go to the maximum, so what's the minimum based upon the 80% AMI that you would usually?
I wouldn't say we would have a minimum overall. It changes complex to complex, depending on the expense level. You know, there's a lot of things, right? It was, how much land area there is. If I look at like Carver Landing and the amount of landscaping that has to take place versus somewhere else that might have a bigger snow load because there's more parking, et cetera, et cetera. So we're basing it on that. So I couldn't sit here and say there's a minimum we would charge.
Okay, so instead of not minimum, what's the average of all the properties?
The
combined?
average one-bedroom is probably in the 19 and change range. It would be the average.
Okay, and second question is, instead of a build out for 80% AMI, why did you choose that instead of a buy down like we did for other projects? And that would have helped with increasing the amount of affordability lower than 80%, which we deemed, a lot of us in consensus last meeting, was unaffordable.
So you're comparing it, say, to the Red Brook project and the buy
Yes.
down? Yeah. So I'm actually glad that came up because I did catch pieces of the last meeting, even though I was away. So there's a big misconception about the money that was used for the Red Brick project, what you actually got from that. So in this particular case, when we bring this project forward, we are asking you to help us build new affordable units that would otherwise not be built. And I'm asking you to provide approximately $130,000 per unit, and we're providing the balance. Those units would then get built, have a deed restriction, and move forward. In the Red Brook model, the majority of those units that you subsidized, other than 10, had to be built. If you said no, and CPC and the town said, we're not giving you any money, they still had to build 52 units, no matter what. And that was a big misconception of how the money was said. So when I heard a lot of comments of like, well, your project, you need $130,000. We can do the same thing at Red Brook for $40,000 or $50,000 or whatever it is per unit to do that. But that's not the case, because to do that overall in the town on a regular basis, what you'd have to do is just build a whole hell of a lot of 40Bs that people were mandated to build 25% affordable units. So again, the $3 million, I think it was, that was spent on Red Brook, that was to take units that were going to be built and just buy them down from 80 to 60. In our proposal, we're asking to build units that otherwise will not get built. This project would not move forward without some sort of support between CPC and a private developer. And to date, no one else has stepped forward in terms of a private developer role on this or any other project that I'm aware of, unless they've been mandated to do it by 40B.
So this project will not get built per the application if we didn't fund it. It would still get built in some aspect, but not per the application.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, we would, if CPC and town meeting had not, if CPC had not and town meeting does not approve this, this would probably go back to the quote-unquote planning board and be reconfigured, and chances are it will be market rate units. What they are exactly, whether we're involved in it at all, I don't know. I mean, that's to be determined. My focus is really, I thought this was a great site for affordable units, and that's why we brought it forward. If it was just market rate units, we may or may not have got involved in it at all.
Thank you. And the last question, I know it's not financial, but based upon the schematic design that you have up there, that third floor, that's just mechanical and empty, right?
Correct. That's just an attic. Those dormers were just for aesthetics. Really, this, it's actually kind of comical. I would just put this on there to show some landscaping and whatnot. The actual architecturals, I think, are in the packet somewhere that show the floor plans and, you know, more, I think there's an elevation plan as well. But the dormers were put in for aesthetics value. There is no third floor. And it
Okay.
is under the, well under the 35-foot height limitations in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes. Ms. Butler, the floor is yours.
Thank you. A couple of questions. The people who are going to rent this, young, older?
So we have a mixed bag. I mean, we have everything from, you know, a 19-year-old to an 80-year-old. It's really a mixed bag. I mean, in lotteries in the past, we've tried to keep some preference to Plymouth residents #1 and veterans #2, and we continue to do that on all our projects. But after that, it's all over the board. And so you really have what I would term as an eclectic mix living in all our projects, and it really does range all gamuts. No, I mean, without a doubt. I'm just trying to think through tenant lists and whatnot, but every project we have really runs the gamut.
Okay. I noticed in the plan, and I went to one of your other properties over by the market.
Yep, on State Road, Carver Landing.
Yes. And I had a couple of concerns about that. One is that there was no elevator. There were 2 staircases at the end, and anyone in the middle, in case of emergency, was going to have a really hard time getting out of the units. I'm seeing the same thing here, that the staircases are at the end.
So on the Carver Road, and I just said State Road, sorry, I meant Carver Road. The Carver Road properties that you looked at, there are no elevators, typically in the 2-story buildings. We have one on the State Road property, but we didn't put them on the other ones. And it was really a way to keep costs down. We keep the handicap units and people who need first floor accessibility. We give people preference for those on the first floor. And then anyone who doesn't, it's 1 flight, which you technically don't need an elevator up to 3 stories. So we're well within the limits. All the properties are designed, as I think the chief would concur, with proper access, egresses, distance from the furthest unit to that egress. They're all fully sprinklered. So it's really not a concern. I will say we do try to improve on that in every property we build. If you notice on this one, the staircases are enclosed. On Carver Road, they're external. And so they're subject to snow and ice and, you know, trying to get things in order. We've enclosed these on both ends to make it easier for people to get in and out. But the distances within are well within, and certainly the chief could comment on that, but they're well within, you know, regulations.
Okay. Another question I had was just, I noticed that they come with tubs.
Mm-hmm.
Elderly people, handicapped people prefer showers.
So the handicap units would not have tubs. This was sort of a generic plan, but the handicap units do not have, they're fully accessible, fully wheelchair accessible from the kitchens to the bathrooms and whatnot. And then we also allow for a certain number of units that can be easily modified to ADA accessibility. So again, we follow those regulations very stringently in terms of what is available. In terms of the tubs, surprisingly, most of the tenants still do want tubs, unless there's a handicapped issue with, which again, we tailor to. But we still find that most people want tubs.
Okay. Is there any storage in the basement or anything? Or?
This is on a slab. We are looking at that. It's on a number of other properties. We were able to build small storage units attached to the building. So we're looking at doing that now. It's not depicted on any of these plans because we're still working on it, and we'll work with the planning board to, you know, find sort of the right spot. Our first objective was getting the building situated, making sure the fire department had their proper access and what they would allow for turnarounds and whatnot. Then we start looking at, okay, so where could we bump out areas to create outside storage?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Richards, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and kudos to my associate on the board, Ms. Butler, who does her homework. I have a couple of problems with this entire project. First off, the household income size for Plymouth is $91,400. I work for Plymouth County, and I'll tell you, there are not many people at the Registry of Deeds, in fact, none, other than two management positions, and that would be the register and the associate and the assistant register, who make over $91,400. Everybody else, the average income is $50,000. So 80% of that would be far less, and they would not qualify for this, for any of these units, nor would they be able to get a Section 8 voucher. So I'm not sure what vouchers are available for this, but I don't think 80% is going to work for any affordable housing. It's not affordable at all in Plymouth County. So I have a problem with that, and I have a problem with paying taxpayer money of
2.
Sorry.
3.2.
Anything, any taxpayer money to subsidize units that are 80% at all, and especially considering Ms. Butler's due diligence in looking at the plans and looking at what's available. So even if you have a 19-year-old, okay, who's making $91,400, I don't know of one, because I don't know of a 50-year-old working for local county government who's making $91,400, so including myself. So it's not affordable, and I don't see my taxpayer money or anybody else's going towards this. So I intend on voting no, but thank you.
So, do you want me to comment on any of that? Or?
You're welcome.
Certainly, I would
Yeah.
love for you to comment. Thank you.
So we would concur 100% that the affordable rates are not affordable, but we don't set them. We just have to work within them. And we also have to work between those rates and what it costs to produce housing units. And the reality is, it can't be done any cheaper than what we're doing it for. And the second reality is that if we were to bring it down to 60%, which we can, we just need more support to do that. We made those both proposals to the CPC, and we talked that through, and have no problem getting it to the 60%. We're all for that. But we're trying to balance of what we're asking for support. We're in a position that, you know, no other developer is stepping forward trying to help build affordable units in town. Any other developer is simply doing a 40B and doing what they must so they can build 300 or 400 units at a whack. That's the only reason they're doing it. There's no gray area to that.
Yeah.
We're trying to sort of bridge that gap and make that happen. I fully agree 80% rate is not affordable. That's why I do bring up the vouchers, because, you know, there's several needs in town, right? There's market rate needs, and that's great, and that's working, and we're part of that end of the spectrum as well. And then there are 60% affordables that someone, like you say, that may be working at the registry or maybe working wherever, can do that. But then there's another swath of people that are with vouchers who can make this work. And again, we have 70-something units that we've built and filled relatively easily. And I'll add, with no help of the housing authorities in town. Like, we've done this just all on our own, marketing it, putting people in there. And there's a desperate need for that. We get calls on a regular basis for those units. So in one breath, I get that it's hard to stomach the numbers. But then I see all the applications, so I say to myself, yeah, it is hard to stomach it, but if we can make this work, it is filling a desperate need. And it has to be done somehow. So there's not a lot of mechanisms to do it at this point.
I have a follow-up question, or maybe comment. So I think if you made your application a little bit more palatable, limited it to Plymouth residents, you know, because if you're saying you give preference.
I don't think we're
and-
allowed to do that. I don't think we can
Okay.
limit it. There's discrimination standards and whatnot, so there's only so far we can go. If I would agree again, if we can limit it to Plymouth residents, I would limit it to Plymouth residents. I would put preferences for veterans. I would put preferences for elderly. We can only take things so far, and if we, I'll take another look at it with the authority we use. We would love to be able to do that, because we do see people coming in from out of town for these. What typically happens on these projects, if we have 24 units, we'll do a lottery. We get 10 people coming in for an application, and then we'll have to market for the rest, because people just don't know about it. And we market heavily in Plymouth.
Thank you. So that would be another reason why I would not vote for it, because if we're not only subsidizing your construction, and then we have people coming in to Plymouth, and then they're also utilizing Plymouth services, and we're just spending
But that's
more
true
and
of
more
every
money.
housing unit we build. We can't be an island. I mean, we can't be, we can't let anyone else
Well,
in. It's just
that's
the
what
reality of it.
That's what our land bank that we just voted for is hopefully going to accomplish. But
to some
thank you very
extent,
much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. O'Connor, the floor is yours.
I'm new, so forgive me if all of this information is somewhere. It feels like we don't have a lot of information if we're looking at costs. This is fairly high level. Cost per square foot on the build?
To break it down, typically land and infrastructure run, and I'm going to talk projects in general, run between $80,000 and $100,000 a unit, depending on where that unit is in town and whatnot. So this is, I think, in the $80,000 range. Square foot construction costs, actual vertical construction costs, typically run about $240 to $260 a unit. Some of them are higher when they're smaller smaller unit counts, when we're down to like 10 units or so. And then on top of that, you've got general conditions and management to build it, which is probably running in the low 20% range to cover all general conditions, overhead, and management.
Okay.
So that's the
For
breakdown.
this project, are we?
Yeah, those numbers
we
are
should look
very, very accurate for what this project is.
Okay, it just, and again, I'm new, so maybe we don't ever get this detail, but things like, is this washer and dryer in unit? Is it a shared washer and dryer?
It's washer and dryer in every unit. So
Okay.
to give you a little, do you want me to jump in with a couple of things?
Just
or?
one quick comment
Okay.
on that, because when I'm thinking about, we're all concerned about the amount of money that would be allocated
Mhm.
here. If I'm thinking about how we could maybe save, we could do shared washer and dryer. I've lived in apartments a lot, and that was not a huge roadblock on my end. It's lovely to have an in-unit washer and dryer, but again, if we're on the track of making good, solid, affordable housing, and we're just picking out, for example, one maybe element that we could look at in terms of saving on build. I know this crew in here is sort of concerned about the amount of money.
Sure.
It doesn't look like we have a lot of details on why this costs, $6 million plus. And I think that's a little bit of a concern on my end when we're looking at this. I hear you, we need it, but it feels to me like we don't have a lot of information on why the numbers are getting to this point and what exactly, this doesn't look like a lot of information to me, so.
So The construction costs we're quoting, I mean, I think, you know, over the last several years, they've been vetted pretty heavily. And, you know, we don't provide, you know, detailed construction of every washer and dryer or whatever, because I think that 240, 250 range is a pretty standard in the industry. And I think, you know, when people see that, it's pretty widely accepted. The land and the infrastructure costs, like I said, can range pretty wild spans depending on if it's sewer, if it's septic, if it's in downtown, if it's, you know, in a more rural area. But we've tried to dial each project in. This one is not the most expensive one, but it's certainly not the least expensive one either. As for the washer and dryer, so when we started sort of this venture, if you will, 7 or 8 years ago, the mandate from everyone we talked to, whether it was the ZBA or the planning board, was we don't want to see you, for lack of a better word, build crap. We want you to build a housing unit that's the same as what you would build for a market rate unit. And that's what we've tried to do. If you look in these units, it's luxury vinyl plank flooring, it's quartz countertops, it's stainless steel appliances, it's washer and dryer in every unit, there's parking on site, there's all of the amenities, they run exactly the same as any other housing unit. Can we back down from that? We can. We have been on this trajectory because that was sort of the mandate. This, just to give a little more color in the background, I mean, this kind of venture started, you know, when we first started developing in Plymouth. The planning board and the ZBA were, I wouldn't say pushing us, but they were looking for someone to do this. And we got on board, we started doing things. I think we helped convince the ZBA to give more money in lieu of, to push it into the Affordable Housing Trust to do things like this. And then they saw progress. And up until this point, there really weren't any housing units being built. There was just kind of it had been fallow for many, many years. And then this kind of took off. If there's a change in the tide, we can certainly adapt to that. If things like common laundry rooms and things like that, we can do it. I don't know if I necessarily agree with doing it, but we want to morph to what Plymouth needs. Right now, you know, and again, I hear there could be concern about the amount of money. But when I look at, you know, this is one of the only ways that actual units will get built. Not buy down of units, but actual new units get built and us, you know, get over that to 7% and then 8% and whatnot. You know, I firmly believe it's worthwhile, and I think it's a reasonable number to spend in conjunction with private money coming in. I mean, to date, I think we've put up between personal funding and financing probably somewhere around $20 million into affordable housing in Plymouth. And, you know, I think it's worked well, and it will never cost the town of Plymouth another dime. It's not like, you know, the Oak Street project or whatever, where, you know, 10 years from now when it needs a roof, someone's going to be coming back. Where it's independent, it's one and done, and I think, you know, that maybe somewhat impacts the numbers as well. So I do get it that it is a lot of money, but I just don't, and we've studied it hard, there's not really another route to get there to build units from scratch as affordable in the town of Plymouth.
Thanks. I didn't mean for you to go down a washer and dryer.
No,
And
I don't disagree with that. We had in some of our first things we've built, even market rate units, we had them. As we moved away from them in market rate, we pulled away from them in affordable units. But I do understand your point. And
just an example.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I just add, was there any other clarification needed on really the differences between this project and the Red Brook model? Because I had heard so much of that it just seemed like, and I don't know if it's specifically this board, but just in general that, you know, oh, we can get affordable units for $50,000, and I just can't stress enough that you can't. You're not getting affordable units for $50,000. You're just buying down the unit that was already mandated to be built by a 40B. So the only way to make that model work is to say, let's build more 40Bs, which no one wants. So well, I shouldn't say no one wants, but everyone I talk to doesn't want them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bizzarro, the floor is yours.
Through the chair, this is a question for former Chief Bradley.
Yes.
In the CPC recommendation, it was 5-2. Do you recall the kind of conversation around the affirmative and the negative?
There were two members that because we have promised out $11.5 million, they did not want to spend any more money on any project whatsoever. They were going to be voting no on it.
Okay, because you reached kind of a threshold within the...
No, those are monies that we've promised out, but those aren't all coming due at once. Like Stevens Field, and then there's some other projects. So they're paid out over time, and it's something that, talking with the finance director and the finance committee, we can manage over the years.
And then one further question. You mentioned previously that there's a delta of about 920 affordable units that we need to get to the 10%.
Yes.
This project is 24 for 24,
Yes.
100% affordable, as opposed to, you're moving closer to that 10% by this project.
Yes, that's
Okay.
what that's.
I just wanted to be clear with that.
And remember, too, that these units will be deeded as affordable. So if you think it's expensive now, think what it's going to cost to build this unit 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when these units are still available with that deeded restriction on them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dunn, did you have a comment?
No, it's more of a comment. I'll save it.
Okay. I'm going to go to Zoom. Mr. Scott, you've been very patient. The floor is yours.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Rick. I have a question. What's the town of Plymouth's oversight after they give you the 3.2 million of funds?
So as a general statement, I guess the biggest oversight is that until we have occupancy permits and the project's completely done, there's no money. So we either self-fund or finance the project in its entirety until there's occupancy permits. And once there's occupancy permits issued by the town, then those funds would come. As far as the tenants going in, again, that's governed by, I'm going to say the entity formerly known as DHCD, because I cannot remember the acronym for the life of me that they do, but they're overseeing the lottery in conjunction with an approved lottery agency. So all the tenants are approved. We have to make the final approval. In other words, we could turn someone down for another reason, like, credit or whatever problems, but we don't actually make the approval. So both occupancy of the building and making sure that it was built to the correct standards and what tenants are going in there are all approved outside of our offices.
Okay. Of the 70 units that you said that you had built in Plymouth that were affordable, what percentage of those are Section 8, since it's guaranteed funds?
So none of our projects are voucher-based. In other words, so there's no guaranteed funds. It's only if someone comes in with a voucher. So there's a distinction that someone could come in with a voucher, or you build a project and it's all voucher-based, and whether you rent them or not, you're getting those vouchers. We have none of those. We don't do any project-based.
No, I understand that. So
what percentage of the people
what
have
percentage
a
are
voucher?
Section 8 vouchers of your 70 units? It sounds like it's really high.
It is relatively high. It varies per project. Some of the two-bedroom units, like at Carver Landing, the duplexes, it's not quite as high. But I'd say overall, it's probably 80%.
And of those units and vouchers, what percentage of the people in those 70 units are from Plymouth?
I would hesitate to answer that because I don't want to give the wrong information. I could get that number for you. We'd have to look back on their application, see where they were from before then. But I will say anecdotally, it's a large number because, again, what happens if we put 32 units out there, we might get 10 or 12 or whatever on the initial round, and then we have to start marketing again. And so we start, honestly, local marketing. I mean, that's where we start with it. We put it out to local groups. If we have to go to outside housing authorities, we obviously start with Plymouth and then go from there. We might go, on the radio. We might put up flyers. We have flyers at the town hall. So we try very hard to get as many for people from Plymouth as possible.
Okay. And these are single-bedroom units. I'm
Right.
assuming a max occupancy of 2?
Correct.
So you have 48 plus parking spots on site to accommodate that?
So you have the planning board or the town bylaw requires 1.3 spaces per unit, which we exceeded that slightly, but that's the normal, and that's what we've done on every project, is either 1.3 for a 1-bedroom or 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom, and we've never had an issue with that.
So if there is an issue here, there's really nowhere else to park. What happens? Do they just
No,
park
there
on
is
Brickley Lane,
additional-
causing traffic incidents?
There is additional space on the property that what we do is we won't put granite curbing in some areas, so that if we need to expand for some temporary parking, we can.
And where is the access going to be to the site? Is it off the South Street or Brayley?
It's off the end of Brayley so that we're not breaking any additional curb cuts. And that was a fairly lengthy discussion with the current fire chief and battalion chief Malaguti going over that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of room there when you're coming around that corner doing, 25 miles an hour, and there's going to be an entrance and a car turning right there.
Well, one of the benefits, I think, to this project is that some of the foliage on that corner does come down, and that's the visibility changes dramatically after that.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here and take the floor and look back and see if there's any more questions. Yes.
So I said
Mr.
earlier,
Dunn.
it's more of a comment, and it is more of a comment, but I want Mr. Veo to be able to respond to it, so if you'll oblige me, I would like to kind of make a comment responding to a question that Mr. Veo asked. And first of all, I want to say, obviously, you guys have done a lot of great work around affordable housing, and the properties look great, and I appreciate that. But I do want to say on the Red Brook project that Grantham Group didn't have any obligation to do anything, and Grantham Group's the one that came in, is building it, is managing it for Red Brook. So there must be some kind of a path to profitability for Grantham Group to come and do units at 30, 60, and 80. Otherwise, Grantham wouldn't have came in for Red Brook and done those projects. So I understand that there's obviously a very big difference between Red Brook was obligated to do those affordable units, you're not, and you're choosing to go this route to add to the affordable housing units that we have, which I appreciate, but there is some kind of a path forward because Grantham Group is doing it in Red Brook, and they're not the ones obligated to have that project.
So a couple of things. The Red Brook project, the land costs were dramatically different. So that off the bat, when you're talking a typical land cost of land and infrastructure of anywhere from $70,000 to $100,000 a unit, that's pretty much gone on that project. So that alone changes everything. So the CPC is paying for that change. I mean, and it's not just paying. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to make a certain percentage, right, a cap rate on the project. Well, they do as well. I mean, so that it's not, I don't think it's a charitable work. It was looking at the numbers and saying, if we got X number of dollars to bring these down to a certain amount, we will always also potentially get federal tax credits. There was a lot of pieces that went into that pie to get that to that number. And I think the fact that their land costs were substantially zero. I'm not going to say zero because I don't know, but substantially less.
I think it was donated.
Yeah, makes a massive difference. So it sort of was a perfect storm to be able to create that. My point in the Red Brook project, and please don't take that the wrong way. I think the Red Brook project is great and it'll work great and whatever. It's just what you were buying was not a unit. You were buying the difference between 80 and 60 or 80 and 30 or whatever the case may be, and that's a big difference.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another comment on Zoom. Mr. Levin, please identify yourself and your address. Mr. Levin? No? Okay, then we'll move on. Mr. Snyder, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a real quick comment and question. $130,000 a unit, you were just talking about one of the major costs of building these things is the land that you get. We have lots of land that Plymouth owns, and some that they buy, they have. Wouldn't it make sense for the town of Plymouth to locate areas that they think could be good for affordable housing, and then have a builder come in and use that land? That would be the contribution, rather than $3 million?
Yes. The simple answer is yes. But that process to get there is going to be years in the making. And I don't think, in the meantime, my personal opinion is we can't stand still. We have to be building affordable housing every single year, kind of dollar cost averaging. But you're right, Plymouth owns a tremendous amount of land, and there are small pockets of land. I'm not a big fan of 300, 400, 500 unit developments. I don't think it's good for the town. I don't think it's good for the environment. If you look at the police logs at most of our developments of that size, it's a train wreck and costs services through the roof. If you look at the smaller developments, it's not the case. Plymouth has a lot of small pieces of land that I can almost guarantee the selectmen and the town administration and all of the boards would be thrilled to see that go forward. And, you know, it would be probably have to go out for some sort of bid to build and have, you know, an RFP and do a full proposal. And I think you would have groups coming in. At least I know we would be coming in. So midterm goal, 100% agree we should be doing that. Short-term goal, it's just not there, and I don't think we should stop the train from moving right now. I think we should try to catch up with that 10% number as much as humanly possible. And more important than that even, like, I do talk about the SHI and where we are and whatever. Honestly, I could care less about the 10% goal. All it is about creating a housing unit and putting someone in it, and that's it. And that the SHI, we may never make it, we may make it, it's all well and good, but if we have people that need housing, that's really all that matters at the moment. And to one other clarification on the, you know, the $90,000 market at the 80%, the numbers we talked about earlier was based on one person. If there were two people, there are a lot of couples, I mean, we have a lot of them that qualify for that, and that fall into that range at 80%. It's a very common thing because most, well, I shouldn't say most, a large portion of our apartments are two people. They're not necessarily just one person.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go one more time to Mr. Levin on Zoom. The floor is yours if you are there.
Hi, my name is Len Levin. I'm a member of the CPC, recently appointed, and I was one of the members who voted against this. So I would like to just, you know, what Chairman Bradley said is somewhat correct, but I just want to have it be my words. I asked Mr. Veo when he was presenting to us what the value proposition to the town was. I understand all this stuff about housing. I was concerned that 80% was not a good thing. But my real concern about this, and I think that we need to understand this with all CPC articles, is we have a large financial commitment backlog for the CPC. If we pass all of the articles that have been presented for town meeting, I think the number is roughly $17 million. If we take in around $4 million a year, and we did not fund one more project, do the math. I don't have to do it for you. So we need to balance that. And as much as this would be a good project, we need to think about it. Because the other thing, we're now have already spent all of the money we will take in fiscal year 2025. So that says when articles come before us for Springtown meeting, all of that will be borrowed money. Now, I understand that think of it as like an accounts payable account. It's aged. We don't have to spend all the money at one time. We don't have to borrow all the money at one time. But ultimately, we still have to borrow that money. And I will say something that might be, in the prior management of this committee, that liability, I won't call it debt, because it's really not debt, we haven't borrowed the money in most cases, but that liability was never spoken about. And I think the committee has a responsibility to talk about it.
Okay, Mr.
And I'm
Levin, thank you
concerned
for
with
your
that
comment. We
how
have,
the members of the committee, how the members of this community will react to that when it's spoken about.
okay, and we
So,
have Ms.
I just
Barrett.
wanted to make sure that people heard that, and basically that was my reason for not voting on it. I understand the benefit of this project, but I just wanted to make sure it was done in the context of the other things that are going on with the CPC committee. I appreciate you letting me have some time, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Levin, and we have just the perfect person to address this. Ms. Barrett, Finance Director, is at the podium.
Just overall general comment regarding any time we've ever had a project where we're recommending borrowing, we're very transparent in letting everybody know that it is a project that the town is going to borrow. We are earmarking future CPA funds to pay off that borrowing, and we've done, a pretty good job of that. I will admit that within the last couple of years that we've, put some more out there on, authorized to borrow, but we're strategically working with each of the developers and groups on when those payments should be made. Mr. Veo spoke specifically about his project, that we've always paid those payments out when the project is complete and we have occupancy and restrictions have been recorded, that kind of thing. So it's something that would fit into the, the future payment schedule of this project. I mean, I would never recommend, the CPC to do this project if I didn't think that we could afford it within the annual revenues that we get and the time frame and restrictions on when we need to borrow the money or not. Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Veo, assume that town meeting approves this project in November. What kind of time frame until this project is done and the town would have to release funds?
Best possible scenario is January 26.
Okay.
And it could quite possibly be a few months after that, depending on by the time occupancy permits, it's recorded, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so it could be, spring of 26. So we're a little ways out. And I will just comment on that in general is that I do recognize, when I approached the CPC on that there were a lot of articles coming up. The problem is these opportunities don't necessarily come up in strategically planned ways. And I look at a piece like this and say, it's multifamily zone, there aren't that many, it fits into this particular area nicely, there's a lot of public services there. If we don't do something, it's gone and it's more market rate units. And that's not ideal for, what we're trying to accomplish. So it's a timely decision, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Lawler, you've been quiet today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Veo, thank you very much for coming. You refer to, if you don't do this project, then someone will come in with quote-unquote market rates or /40B.
This would never be a 40B, but it could be a market rate.
Market rate, or a builder coming in at a 40B.
This project would never be a 40B. It's just not the right
small.
size property for it. It would be some number of market rate units is what it boils down to. I don't know what the number would be. It's most likely not something we would get involved in.
So how long have you been doing this model for? How many years?
So I guess it's about 8 years now. And it started off very slow, to be honest. The first 3.5 years, just getting the first piece into the CPC and gaining some trust and whatnot, it took a while. And then it snowballed from there.
So I just need you to comment, help me understand this. So currently, you come to the town, you build out these units, and then you say, listen, give me some money, and I'll provide a certain percent of these units at a 30%. And it's a 30% or 20%?
80%.
Sorry, AMI, 80%, 80% AMI.
Yeah.
And then the town pays you this money, and you drop a percentage of these units to 80%. In 8 years, I mean, this could work fine 8 years ago, but market prices have catapulted. People's incomes have not. Affordability of that 80% to where you really want to target that AMI number has gone out of reach for someone who needs quote-unquote affordable housing. And the market has kind of pushed this model beyond affordability. It's not your fault. We're just working on a model that worked 8 years ago, and with these type of numbers, I mean, if you're saying that the average rent is $2,200,
$2,100, yeah.
That's not for the average person. But yet, on the other side, what I find amazing is that 80% of your occupancy is voucher related. So I'm in a bewilderment. I'm trying to figure out, you have a model, and costs have gone up, people's salaries have not, affordability is now defined in a different way, and we're stuck. Honestly, truly stuck. We're stuck on a model that is like this, where the town comes up with 3.6.
3.2 million.
3.2. And that brings things down to an 80% AMI, but yet that's not affordable. Can you please comment? Just
it's a tough piece to comment on. I don't disagree with much of it. The only piece I do disagree with is that I do believe the model still works. It works. I mean, we have people living in all these units, and some of them were just occupied a year or so ago, certainly well after COVID and after these jumps. The DHCD approved rates did not change that much over the last couple of years. So we haven't seen those jump up. There was a jump, about 4 years ago where it really ramped up, but it's leveled off, and we do see, I want to say, I think it was last year, they actually came down a touch. So they'll fluctuate around a bit. I do think the model still works. We're still getting many applicants. We don't have vacancies. We still have people calling all the time, do you have any units available? So I think it's a needed model, and it works, and I think it's money well spent. Is there a way to strive toward a better model? Quite possibly. I think Mr. Snyder's comments about the land and town land is an excellent one that could work. It doesn't mean that it might not, it might be the land coupled with some CPC funding, but there may be a way to get down to 60%. And we would certainly look at that going forward and try to come up with that. And we're certainly not opposed to doing it. Again, we kind of jumped into this voluntarily. This wasn't something that we were pushed into or we wanted to build more units. I mean, someone said to me the other day, when I said we were coming here, just said, why are you doing this? Why don't you just go build market units or renovate the registry or, do the Governor Bradford or do commercial space downtown and whatnot? And we're doing it because we just think it's the way to help residents of Plymouth. I mean, we have a lot of different things going on, and this is one way. We give a lot to animal rights causes and that type of thing. That's one of our big things, but this is another way to, to really help. And I do believe, contrary to some of the comments, that this model works, and I would argue that if I took a poll in our 70 units, I would not get one person that says this model does not work. And it's easy to say no one can afford it or someone doesn't at my work can't afford to do that, but there's a whole swath of people that are making it work and would otherwise not be living in Plymouth if it wasn't for these units. So, that's where I kind of hang my hat at the moment. But remember, we kind of created this model and we have no problem, and we've morphed it along the way. Originally, it was a combination of the CPC and Affordable Housing Trust. Then we've changed it some. We've changed the configuration of units. We've done a lot of different things to try to morph over those 8 years. And I see us continuing to do that. And I think some of the comments here tonight are very constructive for trying to find projects in the future to keep that going, because we don't want to stop this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think I saw him, Mr. Malaguti. The floor is yours.
So with this, I know that you did basically state that there are places for the other models, and Mr. Dunn explained the one that was interpreted incorrectly when I spoke earlier. But there are other ways to actually get other percentages by buying down, and while I know that that's not what you are doing in this project, those are other avenues. But I do want to say that, as you stated, that the people that are in your complexes would disagree that this model doesn't work. I agree that this model does not work because, as you stated earlier, you wouldn't give us roughly a percentage that were Plymouth residents and people that moved to Plymouth from other towns for affordability, that we don't know how the actual Plymouth residents actually think, and the Plymouth residents that live here do not have the wages to meet the expectations of the 80%, especially if they're starting out or they're elderly, which is the large majority of people that are looking for affordability in this town. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? All right, so seeing no further questions. Yes. Sorry, Mr. Lawler, the floor is yours.
Just to help me out, I'd like to be educated on this. Are you saying that there is a state law saying that you cannot make this property exclusive to Plymouth residents?
I'm not stating that. I'm stating that I'm not aware of any mechanism that we could state that everything has to be Plymouth residents. I think when we put out the lottery, we can give preference, but once that lottery is, if, let's say, 4 Plymouth residents apply, and there are 6 more that are from elsewhere, and there are 10 units, we can't deny those other people. It's the best of my, I could be wrong, but to the best of my knowledge, that's not possible in the lottery system, which is required under all affordable housing to run that lottery system. And keep in mind, I know we keep talking about Plymouth people coming from the outside. Everyone that lives in our units is a Plymouth resident. So we can talk about they just moved in, or we all just moved in. I just moved in not that long ago. So we can discuss it like that, but they're all Plymouth residents. They're living here, they need housing, and we're going to continue to have people come to Plymouth because arguably it's the greatest town in the state of Massachusetts. I mean, there's reasons why people are flocking here, whether they are in affordable units or they're coming to spend, $2.8 million on a waterfront home. So I don't necessarily agree with, the whole outside. I think we can give that preference, but then I think, if someone needs a house and they want to come to Plymouth, we should be embracing them.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing and hearing no further questions, Mr. Green, would you care to make a motion to approve Article 9?
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn, would you care to second that
Second.
motion? So we have a first from Mr. Green and a second from Mr. Dunn to approve Article 9. Any discussion? Mr. Dunn?
Just real quick, I just want to say, I think this is one of the few times that I've actually come into something undecided. Still thinking about it right now, but I think you've made a lot of great points, and I appreciate all the projects you've done in the past, and you guys do make the affordable units look like market rate units, and it's good construction. You guys maintain your properties well. It's also a lot of money. And what I said last week, which now I don't know if I'm going to go back on what I said last week, but what I said last week was that I didn't want to vote for any more 80% projects due to what we've talked about and what is actually affordable, and looking at people's incomes, like was mentioned earlier, versus the affordability. What I said last week was that I'd rather put all this money aside and save it to get more affordability, and I'd rather put some of this money aside and go for something that's 50 or 60% AMI. So, I appreciate everything that you've done, and I appreciate the projects you've done. I'm just not sure that I can support this with this much money.
Okay, Mr. Pizarro, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Mr. Dunn, thank you for those comments. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat from last week and talking about AMI, and I've learned a lot over the last year about 40B, and affordability, and how it impacts people's health, having housing, these structural determinants of health. But, when I was doing the math, we are 920 units short. And if we keep, let's just use 130,000, that's 121 million that we would have to support in order for those things to be made if we had projects like this that were 100% affordable at 8%. Earlier in the evening, we made a change to some bylaws, zoning bylaws, right, to reduce density on the waterfront. What if a 40B, and I was just thinking this, and maybe someone on the committee can help me wrap my head around that, but what if a developer wants to do a 40B project on the waterfront, and they only have to do 20 to 25% affordable at 80%, they're basically subsidizing with this primo waterfront housing, the 20 to 25% that's affordable at 80% AMI, right? And we would not, as a town, have recourse because it's a 40B, right? So to me, the faster we get to our 10% or get to a point where we can show the state that we can be in an exception, that we're making great progress towards that, and they give us an exception, to me, this gets us closer to that 10%, because it's 100% of the units are affordable. And so that's where I'm kind of wrapping my head around it. So thank you.
I think this committee is looking for a little more to sweeten the pot, and I think you turn people in your favor. It just appears that way. Even if it's to make, so you mentioned that 95% of the people qualify with the vouchers, but what if the other 5 or 10% had a 60% without the voucher, and you had a blended 80/60. Wondered if this committee might feel a little better about a proposal like that for that kind of money. Just put it out there. Mr. Green?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Veo. I've seen a couple of your properties in town. I think it really adds a lot. The vitamin C, I believe that's one of your buildings, and on Warren Ave as well. Both of those are just changing the town. I love it. Outside of this project, and I said it a couple of times, I think that the way that the direction of the CPC right now is becoming a just funding source for large housing projects. I don't feel like that's what CPC funds are for. Yes, they can be used for that, but when we're using that $3 million at a time, $3 million at a time, it just adds up, and we're gonna miss out on something that could be like something like Sewell Farm in Middleborough. That place is incredible. That's a CPC project. I just feel like we're missing out on a potential project like that when we straddle up with that and leverage the CPC. And I'm a little afraid of that, and that's where I'm hesitant for this project. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Yes, Ms. Richards, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And piggybacking on Mr. Green, I'm going to say I agree with not leveraging all of our money in affordable housing. And I am also concerned about our CPC funding. As somebody who sees the deeds go through every day and how much we're collecting in CPC funds, it is, the deeds are dwindling. Our recordings are significantly down. And I'm talking significantly down. And if we're going to be potentially looking at down the road of CPC money that could be potentially coming in, that's going to be a big mistake. The county budget was based on potential revenues, recording revenues, deeds excise revenues, and they came in way short this last budget, and had to go into their stabilization fund to make up the difference. So we want to be really careful about that. In addition, I think, anything 80%, based on 80% is a big mistake. And although I understand Mr. Pisano's position, I think holding this 10%, spot that we're all looking for over the heads of the residents in Plymouth is also a big mistake. We all want to get to that, but getting to it, 5 units, 10 units, 20 units at a time, by way of $4 million and $3 million is not the way to do it. So I intend on voting no. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Yes, Mr. Lawler, the floor is yours.
Rick, I think you're starting to get caught in a change, a cycle, that things are changing. You've done some great things for Plymouth. I've seen your construction. It's excellent. It really helps the town. Looks great. But after listening to Len Levin and Dan, and listening to some of the members here, Brian, et cetera, I think we're coming into a change of what to do with CPC funds, what to do with a problem that is occurring where costs are rising and people's affordability is not there. So the 80% is not working. It's not affordable. It's not affordable rent. And I came into this saying, no, 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 no way. And now I'm saying, wow, I think we're in a position that we need to change something, and we're looking for something to change. And I think the model that we have right now here is not a model that is addressing what Plymouth needs, nor is the definition of what CPC is supposed to be doing being satisfied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lawler. Any other discussion before we put Article 9 to vote? Hearing and seeing none?
Mr. Chairman, were you asking, I wasn't clear when you brought up the potential of adding 60%. Were you asking me if I would change something on it, or you were asking the board?
No,
I
I'm
just
putting it
wanna
out
be-
to the committee, and
Okay.
it's been my observation through a number of these presentations that sometimes we're looking for something a little more for the money. And I just was kind of getting a little litmus test of this committee to see if it really is about that, if the pot was sweetened, the proposal changed slightly, if this was something that we could totally support. And just put it out there. Now, if you want to comment on that, that's...
Well, I guess my only
it's-
comment would be, it certainly didn't seem like that would change anything. So I don't know that I would, for lack of a better way of putting it, bother if it's not going to change anything. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of interest in this at all, and that's fine. Again, I look at it differently. I agree with the model is morphing, and we've been morphing with this, but it's not going to morph that quickly, and I don't think we can stand still in the meantime, or I think you're truly hurting people. And I think the CPC saw that, and I think the town meeting members have seen that over the last 7 years, and that's why there's every project we've put forward, they've approved, and usually by very, very large numbers. So I disagree that we should be stopping and then, what will probably take a few years to come up with a different model and start it up again. I think, we need to be doing projects like this with an eye that, honestly, I would never bother coming back with an 80% model going forward. I would come up with some other plan and go forward. But that plan probably isn't happening for quite some time. And again, I just don't see stopping. So if the board is interested in, I don't know, I guess I would, off the top of my head, say 10% of the units being 60%, and that changes things. Yeah, we would probably do that. I mean, when the CPC, Bradley's not behind me. No, I wasn't calling you up. I was just referencing you. When they came back to me at that meeting and said, hey, can you adjust the numbers slightly? We stepped up and put more money into the pot and tried to make that happen. So this project has gotten squeezed more and more. I mean, would we do a little bit more to try to get everyone on board? We've never brought an article to town meeting without Finance Committee and Selectmen's full, well, I don't know if it was full support, but support. And we want that. We've never been turned down on a project in town from planning or zoning board of appeals, and that not because we think we're something special, it's because I think we try to adapt the projects to what the town needs and what the boards are looking for and what people can get on board with, and then we move it forward. And I think most of our projects have entered the channels, whether it's a town meeting channel or whether it's just zoning board of appeals channel, as one piece, and it's morphed slightly by the time it gets to the end of it, usually for the better. So we don't have a problem doing that, so I would say we could do 10% of them at 60, but I just didn't get the impression that that was going to really make a big difference at this point.
I'd like to have a discussion of that. Does that
I was just
Does
gonna
that
say,
change some minds here? I mean, give me some feedback.
That would help me a little bit, yes.
Okay. Thoughts? No, how many units would we be talking?
Well, you're talking 2.4, but it would actually be 3 units that we would do.
Does that change, does that move the dial at all for anybody?
It moves the dial for me. I mean, Mr. Vail is very very clear that there's a dichotomy going on here. We need the units. We need housing at a discounted rate. The pie can be sweetened. He still has to march forward. You know, he's the only one that's coming forward and saying, I'm gonna present this model. There's no one else out there presenting the model like this. So he can continue to move forward, and we can continue to drive as a group to help get that number more realistic for affordability. But he's moving the dial for us. And I don't see anyone else doing that.
Okay, anybody else?
Can we think about it?
Well, so I'll tell you what we did last year is that we unanimously rejected the article from Red Brook, and they came back with a different package later in the session, and we overwhelmingly, unanimously approved it because it was a better deal for the town.
I'd like to make a motion to table.
Okay. Any discussion on tabling this? And so, Mr. Dunn, what is the purpose and how do you see moving forward with the tabling
I
of
mean,
this?
I think if we're going to come back with a couple of units at a different percentage or something like that, and that goes through CPC, same thing like we did with Red Brook, except I just don't want to vote it down this time. And then it came back after it went back to CPC, and then we unanimously approved that, I think.
I don't think we'd be going back to CPC
With that,
with that, because I think it's getting better. It's not, in other words, if we were taking units away or whatnot, so we wouldn't be going back through the
Okay,
process.
So the procedure is not to go back, so that you would just present here.
Right.
in
Again,
the
if we're
next couple of
improving
weeks.
something, I don't think we have to backtrack. If we were taking units away or,
Okay, that's fine.
a different story.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, that's
We'll-
fine, I'll vote on it. I'll rescind my motion.
Okay, well, so, no, their motion is to table it and then come back, have
But he's
Mr.
saying we don't need to come back, he's,
yeah, so I mean, the
you-
proposal is the proposal. We would just move forward with that.
You would change,
So it would be 3 units would be at 60%, correct?
so I think we can just vote on that now.
hold on, so. All right, Mr. Malaguti, the floor is yours.
So if we did this, because I'm getting a little confused now, and I think town meeting will as well, if the language isn't stated correctly in the article for them, because it's stated at 80 AMI for the summary intent of this CPC recommendation. So if they were not including the 60% that is being talked about, then town meeting is going to think that it's 80% AMI when we're voting on this. So I think there does need to be clarification and possibly a rewrite of the
Would it be-
language or summary intent.
Would it be an amendment?
So
Sorry.
the language in the article doesn't dictate percentage AMI. It's 24 affordable units.
Okay,
And the funding mechanism is going to stay the same, 3.2 million. And if he agrees to, because when he presented this, it was a combination of different funding sources to get it to 60 or to have it at 80. So, I mean, he is saying now that he is going to do 3 units at 60% and the rest of them at 80%. It doesn't have to, it's not in the article language. It is the project that he is going to do.
okay, so procedurally.
And it was never in the language of the Red Brook article either, for the
That's true.
different,
That's
you know?
true.
So,
Okay, thoughts?
Ms. Barrett,
Mr. Howard?
so would you advise that, that we could have a letter?
it's your recommendation. So your recommendation is that your vote, if you're going to vote in the affirmative, would be based on having 3 units at 60%, 80, and the rest of them at 80% for the 3.2 million for 24 affordable units that we would have restrictions on.
I would just recommend 4 units as opposed to the 3.
I think we want it to hurt.
You don't want
Honestly, it's after 10. You can have whatever you want. No, I'm just kidding. If you just put me on last every night, it'll be fine. I've been up since 4:30, so.
It wasn't our intention to wear you down.
I'm just kidding. I'm more than happy to be here, and
But if that's how it has to happen.
that's fine.
Okay, so
That's fine.
4 at 60% and the other 20 at 80% is what's on the table right now.
Correct.
Do I have a good feel across the board? Okay. All right.
Let's vote.
So we have a first and a second, and now we are voting to approve Article 9 with 4 of those units at 60% AMI and 20 of those units at 80% AMI. And Mrs. Butler, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Malaguti?
No.
Okay, and Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
And that's 10 for, 1 against, and 0 abstentions. That article passes on to town meeting. Thank you, Mr. Veo, very much for making this work.
Thanks for all the input. It's great.
Okay, so, I know, did somebody turn the AC off? It got hot all of a sudden. Okay, for Article 31, the town's legal counsel and the town moderator advised that the Advisory and Finance Committee take no motion, no action, due to the article being outside the scope of town meeting authority. That comes from legal counsel and the town moderator. However, typically, we would not hear from a motion, no action, but as a courtesy, this committee will grant this article 5 minutes to make your presentation. We get that. So you're welcome to come up, identify yourself. After your presentation, there will be no discussion and no vote. But thank you. And identify yourself and your address, please. There you go.
So I especially study the effects of trauma on the brain in children and the effects throughout the lifespan, which was ultimately what connected me to Gaza and to what's going on there. But anyways, Larry and I are here to discuss a citizen's petition and present information about Article 31, the Gaza ceasefire resolution. I believe we have copies if anyone needs one, but you can also get one at the Linktree Plymouth ceasefire resolution. Larry is here to talk more about the financial side, and I'll be covering the advisory side in terms of our reputation in this town over the long term, our legacy, and how we live up to the history that happens every day. Do you need help with if you go to the slideshow, up there, up top? It's over, yeah, right there. Don't go press down, yeah, oh yeah, presenter view, or that works too. Thank you. So I'm also an amateur history buff, and especially regarding the Plymouth Rock. I enjoy all the false history that surrounds it, and it all harkens back to those early kindergarten trips, I think. So I've lived in the South Shore my entire life. And I'll skip around a little bit, but as you will hear from Larry, in terms of town finances, we as Plymouth residents do spend our hard-earned money on bombs and bullets that kill and traumatize innocent people in Palestine. I hope I'm able to explain why adopting a ceasefire resolution would indeed be advisable for the current and long-term reputation of Plymouth as a community, as a tourist town, and as a unique and important place in history. There are also connections to very recent events, as some publicity and headlines that perhaps harmed the reputation of the town and our perceived ability to understand and learn from our own history. And finally, and most importantly of all, our Plymouth neighbors that were trapped in Gaza for a month, from October 7th to November 6th, 2023. So the general reason for a citizen's petition and ceasefire resolutions at local town meetings over other methods, such as call your congressperson. Firstly, there are many general reasons why any town or city in the Commonwealth, or indeed the country or world, may pass a local ceasefire resolution and bring a ceasefire resolution before local town governments. There may be a collective moral stance against this extreme form of violence, connections to local history as a message to politicians, connections to residents of Palestinian, Muslim, Jewish, Arab descent, parents, taxpayers, or especially a message to our politicians, and for another big financial reason we will discuss forthcoming. Ceasefire resolutions have been passed in Boston, Cambridge, Medford, Wellfleet, and was on the floor at Arlington's town meeting as well. And that was only as of March 2024. Since then, I don't know the number, but as of March 2024, over 100 total cities and towns in the United States had passed a ceasefire resolution. And we can get into the specific reasons as they relate directly to Plymouth, but in the general sense, a major reason why it's important for local town governments, including Plymouth, to weigh in on this issue is because local government is generally the most direct voice of the people without the interfering influence of money or politics. Regular, everyday citizens have wanted a permanent ceasefire for months. On May 8th, 2024, in a poll of likely U.S. voters, 83% of Democratic voters supported a ceasefire, 65% of independent voters supported a ceasefire, 56% of Republicans supported a ceasefire, 7 out of 10 voters support a permanent ceasefire, and probably more now as we watch the death toll rise. And yet, elected officials on both sides of the aisle do not vocally represent this clear majority of their constituents. Why? And that's from dataforprogress.org if you're looking for a reference. Well, this is why.
We'll give you one more minute.
Our major politicians on both sides of the aisle take significant amounts of money from lobbying groups. And I'm going to skip ahead. So all that said, the most honest and direct voice, untainted by money or politics in most cases, is the voice of the people through things like citizens' petitions at town meetings. The hope is that the town meeting members will take the opportunity to educate themselves with quality information on the history of Palestine and Israel by watching documentaries or reading books and listening to the voices of Palestinian Plymouth residents themselves, and learn more about the facts on the ground in Gaza before they vote on this issue. Passing a town ceasefire resolution will send the message to our legislators that voters do care about this issue enough to take a stand on it and do not accept their ambivalence and lack of action.
Okay, your time is up, but we appreciate you coming.
Could I get a couple more minutes, just because there still
I-
is a significant amount, and we were on the
No.
schedule, and all of the other presenters had a significant amount of time, and I don't know that there is a legal precedent for us to be removed outrightly from the warrant of town meeting.
Okay, I'm not going to have an argument with you here. We extended your presentation as a courtesy, not as a requirement.
And yet the other people that presented had significantly more time than I do. I have about two more
They
slides and I'm
had-
not done yet.
Again, this is a no motion, no vote.
But that's due to the town council that isn't, Wellfleet passed a ceasefire resolution in their town
Okay,
meeting.
I'm going to ask you to conclude in the next 15 seconds.
You know, you sit at the seat of government in Plymouth, Massachusetts,
Okay,
the
I'm not-
earliest form of
I'm
government.
not going to argue with you. I'm going to send you back to the town council and town moderator. There's nothing we can do for you here.
Right,
Um,
despite the fact
We gave you,
that the
Let's
other
see.
presenters, who were all male, by the way, right?
all right, could you please,
Of a
could you
certain-
please step
right?
down? Could you please step
And
down?
all about a certain subject, too.
Can you
Right,
please step-
development.
Can you please step down? You're overstaying your welcome here. Thank you. Okay, Mr. DiNardo, you would like to make a public comment? No, we had 5 minutes. Actually, we gave more.
Though. I believe each resident of this town, do you guys know, like, the MGL laws and stuff that govern these meetings?
Mr.
He is another
DiNardo, please,
person.
you may take the lectern, please.
And Larry should be able to after, as well as a citizen of Plymouth, Massachusetts. He will have-
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll be extremely brief. Al Donato, Precinct 17. Tonight before you, I had Article 32, which was a petition article bylaw, and I had notified the moderator back in May that I was drafting a bylaw that would require all precinct caucuses to have public comment. And the irony tonight is I'm using this venue because issues change almost by the hour, and that happened tonight. I was unaware, and I was never told that there was an issue legally with this issue. And the moderator, I did speak to the moderator tonight during this meeting, and he expressed to me that it is not shown to be a bylaw. I guess he wanted the word bylaw in the bylaw itself. And I had said to the moderator, there's really only 3 major things we do, and that is money, zoning, and bylaws. What else would it be? Stating that all caucuses must have a public comment. So this is where we stand tonight. I was not notified of this. I was involved with the conundrum today with Oak Street School with those meetings, and we have another one here tonight. So I don't know what to say, but I was hoping to get some sort of vote on from this body so that this article could go before town meeting so the body could vote on it.
Okay, so during this meeting, I was in communication with the town moderator, and his stance was that you need to do a new petition for next town meeting. That's where we are with this. There's nothing more that we can do on this committee.
I hate to call a special. Yeah, but, okay. I just wanted to let you know what was going on.
Who's operating this? Who's operating this?
Well, this is the Plymouth family.
Can you turn that off, please? Turn-
They live here. They moved. There was hardly any support when they
Okay, let's move on to, is there any new, old, or other business in our packets?
Public comment still?
I'm sorry?
Public comment still?
Yes.
Yes. I know last week this committee voted down Article 13, and there was some talk about possibly reconsidering that tonight, and as long as Mr. Veo and I are here and Lynn, I thought maybe if that's going to happen.
Okay, so
I'd like to make a motion to reconsider Article 13.
right.
I'd like to second that, please.
Very good, based on the definition that we received on vernal pools. So, do we want to take a vote on this? We have a motion on the table. Would you like Mr. Lawler to put a motion to
A motion to
reconsider
reconsider.
Article 13? It was the vernal pool.
Article 13 was the housing.
It's the 960, wait, is it 8? I thought.
8
Mr.
is
Bradley, I
wetlands.
thought you said 13. Is it? Are you talking about the vernal pool? No, that's not
No,
what I'm
it
trying
was
to
the
talk about.
affirmation article for the Court
Is that
Street
13?
housing
Sorry, I
project.
misspoke. Article 13?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wait, is
13. The affirmation article
that- And that's 13.
for Court Street. Yeah, the Article 13.
Okay, yeah, that's the one I'm trying to do.
Article 13 is the 132 Court Street.
Yes.
Okay, so are we doing, we're actually going to do this?
Doing it now?
Okay.
He's here.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table to reconsider Article 13. And do we have any
Tim Waller.
discussion?
I have just a
Ms.
point of order.
Richards?
Since I was not here at last meeting, can I vote on this since I've read the article, or do I abstain?
I would abstain if you are not knowledgeable about what you're voting on.
Oh, No, I did read up on it, but I will abstain since I wasn't here. Thank you.
Okay, well, I mean, if you feel comfortable that you are in the know and you've read up on it, I don't have a problem with you weighing in on a vote.
Very good, thank you.
You know, we've seen this before where people have missed meetings and they read the minutes and they felt like they were comfortable making a vote on things. So I would use that same procedural.
Very good, thank you very
Okay,
much.
Any more discussion? Yes, Mr. Pizarro.
So last week, when we voted on this, it was because, and I'm just echoing this back, 24 of the units were supposed to go to the SHI inventory, but it's really 10. Is that correct?
Correct. The reason they pulled it back was that the CPC chair at the time had said that all of them were going to count towards it. Town meeting voted with the assumption that all of those units would count towards the SHI, and then we were informed afterwards that those wouldn't all count towards the SHI. So they had to bring it back this town meeting, or actually, I shouldn't say they had to bring it back. I think, Mr. Veo, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he could have just said, no, you voted for it, I'm going to take the money. But he allowed it to come back to get a more accurate understanding, I think, of what happened.
Okay. So then, that 960,000, I think, is the amount that they're asking, is divided by 10, $96,000 per unit.
I think,
No?
I think it's divided by 6. I think he's building
6?
4. I think
Okay.
he's building 4 on his own.
Okay.
And then
Thank you.
asking for money for 6, if it's.
Any other? Yes, Mr. Green. The floor is yours.
So I was here when we voted for this the first time last year, or at the beginning of the spring. So we voted for this. I think it's the right thing to do, to affirm which we've already voted for. And when it was presented the first time, there was no talk of these extra units. It was as it's written. There was no misrepresentation in this meeting, and we all voted yes. So I'll be voting yes.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Mr. Lawler?
Just to reiterate, it was brought forward just for a correction, and that is it. So I will be voting for it.
Thank you.
I just want to say that if this came before us today as a new project, I would vote no, like I did last week. But after talking to town council and about potentials for litigation, and there's the fact that this was approved by town meeting, and I knew what it was, and I honestly, no offense to the select board who pulled it back, but I thought it was stupid of them to pull it back. I think everyone could read the article and knew what it was. I think it was kind of pointless to pull it back. I think it should have just gone forward the way it was, but they wanted to do due diligence. So I think I feel like an idiot, but I think I'm gonna vote for it.
Okay, any other comments, discussion? Hearing and seeing none. We are voting yes to reconsider or approve Article 13. We reconsider it, we're voting to reconsider it, and then after that, we'll vote whether we approve or not approve the reconsider. Okay, Ms. Butler, how do you
Yes.
vote on reconsideration?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Malaguti?
No.
Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
No.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
9 yes, 2 no, and 0 abstentions. So the reconsider passes. Any discussion on voting to recommend Article 13 as it's been clarified to town meeting? No. Okay,
If we do, motion to recommend approval.
thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you. So we have motion on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, we are voting on Article 13 to send it back to town meeting for approval. Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
No.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Malaguti?
No.
Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
No.
Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
8-4, 3 against, and 0 abstentions. The Article 13 passes, and the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends to town meeting to approve this Article 13. Okay.
Thank you. And you did that without ever having to hear me talk, too. That was perfect.
One other note, Article 30 is a no action, no vote. That was slated for September 18, so you can take that off of your schedule. I will get to the public comment in a minute. Thank you. We also included the definition of the vernal pool into the bylaw, and that's how it will go into town meeting. So that's just a procedural thing, right, Jeanette? Okay, just letting you know. Go ahead.
Yes, the select board voted to have that included in the actual wording of the bylaw.
That's the vernal pool definition. There was concern on this committee that it was very broad and that a puddle in your driveway could be seen as a vernal pool. So there is a definition that makes it so that the puddle in your driveway is not considered a vernal pool. So I think that Article 30 is off the list. Okay, any old or new business? Okay, so I will take public comment. You may come up. You have 5 minutes to, and this is a public comment, not a presentation. It's a public comment.
Well, my name's Larry Hartinian.
Okay.
I live on Federal Furnace Road. I've been in Plymouth for 12 years. I'm a member of Plymouth for Palestine, and I'm going to make my public comment. U.S. tax dollars are paying for what Israel is doing in Palestine. Estimates are that of the $3.8 billion that is paid by the U.S. to Israel, virtually all of it for military purposes, about $900,000 comes from Plymouth. There has also been $14 billion supplemental passed this year, and if you keep that process that I just described, that would suggest that Plymouth is paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million for what is going on by Israel in Palestine. This military aid is allowing this conflict to continue. I think we all, as members of, as residents of Plymouth, have something to say about this. Tragically, last week, Israel expanded its attacks into the West Bank. Furthermore, we need to understand that there's a very realistic threat of further escalation of the conflict. If the current conflict were to escalate, a war between Israel and Hezbollah, and/or a war between Israel and Iran, or even a broader Middle East war, this would almost certainly draw the U.S. into a military conflict. This is not just a nightmare, but it is a real possibility. If this were to happen, we cannot now begin to estimate the killing, the human suffering, and the physical destruction, and the American casualties that would occur, nor how it would all end. A ceasefire is necessary now. As Meg suggested, Boston, Cambridge, Sandwich, Amherst, Wellfleet, Greenfield, they've all passed this. All these citizens felt the need to raise state and national attention to their views. They are citizens like us, and they are members of town government like you, who cannot endure or tolerate the silence. More deaths, more maiming, and more suffering. With this many cities and towns in the Commonwealth signing onto the Gaza ceasefire resolutions, we have no idea how the moderator can say that our ceasefire resolution is outside the scope of town meeting. Clearly, the above-mentioned cities and towns don't think so. We ask you to join your voices to ours to thereby raise awareness, to thereby pressure our national politicians, and hopefully bring this tragedy to an end. We believe the Biden administration can and must exercise much more influence, much more pressure, specifically on Israel, to put an end to this conflict. This is not a distant conflict in a distant land. We need a ceasefire now. We need peace now. You need to hear our voices, and politicians at the national level need to hear our voices. Plymouth Town Meeting needs to consider our Gaza ceasefire resolution. We ask for your support.
Thank you so much for sharing your comments with us. And with that, I don't see anybody on Zoom except for Mr. Levin, but I assume he's not interested in a public comment at this point. And with that, I'm entertaining a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right, Ms. Butler has made a motion to adjourn, and Mr. Snyder has seconded that motion. Any discussion about adjourning? I didn't think so. Okay, so let's go to the vote. Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Malaguti?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Pizarro?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro, sorry. Ms. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder? Yes. Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
It is unanimous, 11 to 0 to 0. We are adjourned at 10:39 p.m.